In the apocalyptic abyss, Dabo once said something that sounded like an empty promise. Today, Qin finally understood. Some of the goblins' empty promises were actually an entire palace. Please continue following Qin into the next episode. Makes sense. Qin nodded slightly, pausing for a moment before continuing. All right, you head down first. I'll call you if I need anything. It was now certain that the telescope in the fat guy's hands was indeed made by his train. As for what methods his father used to obtain this telescope, that remained unknown. But it definitely involved something extremely important, otherwise he wouldn't have been so furious. After a long while, Qin leaned back on the couch, exhaling deeply. His voice was soft, as if muttering to himself. In the universe, there really is too much chaotic mess. The distance between the two civilizations must be at least over 100,000 light years. I'm sure of that. Exactly how far, he didn't know, because he could only see civilizations within 100,000 light-year radius. But from that far away, how did that guy manage to steal the telescope? The more he thought about it, the more it bugged him. But then another thought struck him. The fat guy's father suddenly getting rich was very likely related to this. That fat guy was quite endearing and simple-minded. Regarding his father's secret, Qin hadn't even needed to set a trap or fish for information. His initial goal was just to hear some general info about the Nanmei civilization. Yet the fat guy spilled everything on his own. If this got out, he'd definitely get beaten to a pulp. How it all happened wasn't important for now. What Qin needed was to figure out how to exploit this and turn it into a massive benefit for himself. Inside the stellar ship, Qin sat alone in the cabin, staring into the deep abyss of the vast universe, silent for a long time. He didn't have any clear clues for now, only knowing that the level 10 telescope had left his hands. As for why it ended up in the hands of the fat guy's father, countless light years away, that was a complete mystery. Too much had happened recently. He suddenly felt that he should relax a bit. It had been a very long time since he truly relaxed. Back in the apocalypse, he still got occasional breaks. Even though resources were scarce then, at least things weren't this chaotic. Since leaving the Aqua Blue Star, the world had become more complex, and his free time had dwindled. So much so that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to relax. Xiao Ai, called Ji Chu Chu, and Yin Yao over. Qin suddenly realized he hadn't called them in a long time, to the point where the name Ji Chu Chu sounded a bit unfamiliar, like something tossed into a corner of his memory. Very quickly, Ji Chu Chu and Yin Yao pushed the door open and walked in. Behind them was a line of women as beautiful as descending fairies. Qin glanced at them, slightly stunned. Who are they? Ji Chu Chu replied. They're the ones brought over from the Xuanwu planet last time. You haven't made use of them yet. Oh right. Qin nodded. He really had forgotten. He casually grabbed some red-hearted pine nuts from the drawer, popping them into his mouth as a snack, then waved his hand. Play a tune first. The mood isn't right yet. At that exact moment, countless light years away, in a study, an old man was bowing his head, writing diligently, when his pen tip suddenly snapped. The minor mishap made him frown. Ever since he woke up yesterday, he had been restless, feeling like something was about to happen. This mishap only made the bad premonition in his heart clearer. He immediately called the high-priced security team hired in the southern frontier, his voice deep. What's the situation? The other end answered very quickly. Everything is fine. The young master is happily repairing his armed mech. No issues. Any space pirates approaching this mining planet will be dealt with immediately. Hearing this, the old man finally breathed a sigh of relief. Keep it up. Complete the mission smoothly, and on top of your fee, there will be a hefty bonus. Understood. Confirming that his unfilial son hadn't run into trouble, the old man poured himself a cup of hot tea. But even so, he still felt a heavy weight pressing on his chest. Could it be that his body was due for a restoration? He pulled out a device hidden on his person, plugging it into his body to check his real-time health data. No matter how rich he was, he only underwent restoration when his body truly couldn't function anymore. Even the richest did the same, and not necessarily because of money. The longer the interval between restorations, the longer a person could live. Civilization still hadn't found a way for humanity to achieve eternal life. Or more accurately, such a thing shouldn't exist in the first place. Even the universe wasn't eternal, So how could things born within it be eternal? Including cultivation civilizations. The eternity that cultivation civilizations sought after attaining the immortal emperor realm wasn't true eternity either. It merely shared the lifespan of the universe. When the universe perished, their lifespans ended too. That wasn't true transcendence over all things. Everything in this universe had to rely on the universe itself. The old man sat back down at his desk, flipping through piles of books and notes. Recently, he had acquired something absolutely incredible. It came from a cultivation civilization, a level 6 cultivation civilization. This was no trivial matter. His current civilization, the level 5 Nanmei civilization, had only been established for 5,000 years. But a level 6 cultivation civilization must have gone through at least millions, even tens of millions of years, accumulating over a massive span of time. Furthermore, cultivation civilizations had an extremely unstable development curve, being terrifyingly weak in their early stages. At levels 1 to 3, they were almost incapable of fighting against any civilization of the same tier. Even though their late stages were truly powerful, placed within the current cosmic civilization landscape. Being weak in the early stages meant there wouldn't be any late stages at all. In a situation where anyone could step on them, where would they get the chance to rise? The old man paused his reading. His mind subconsciously flashed back to the times he was pushed to the brink, where being just a beat too slow meant being crushed on the spot. The more he thought about it, the colder his eyes grew. This item absolutely could not be brought to his auction house. It was too eye-catching. He had to study it himself. He owned many companies, but the business that truly built his empire and remained his biggest cash cow to this day was the Fengtian auction house. Every year, it brought in massive profits, to the point where everyone was dying to know what sourcing channels he used to hoard such rare collectibles. He had dozens of fleets constantly traveling through space, scavenging for lost artifacts scattered in hidden corners. But in reality, that was all just a front. The real money tree that provided him with those rare items was... The old man slowly set his pen down, his heart still restless. He leaned over, pulled open the drawer, and saw a teapot that had appeared out of nowhere. He chuckled softly, yet genuinely. New stock again. At first glance, it looked like a product of a cultivation civilization. As for what it exactly was, it would need an appraisal. That's right. The real treasure that kick-started his empire was this drawer. The drawer of this very desk. It was a desk he bought for dirt cheap at a long-abandoned second-hand furniture market back when he was down on his luck. Once, while pulling an all-nighter, a drop of his nosebleed accidentally fell onto the desk, and a miraculous scene unfolded. The desk suddenly glowed with a golden light, and the drawer popped open on its own. Ever since then, all sorts of items would occasionally appear in the drawer. Some were special props of immense value. Some were original blueprints for accessories that the Nanmei civilization had never seen or researched. Others were collectibles from higher-tier civilizations. For example, there was once a painting by an artist from a level 9 civilization that auctioned for an astronomical price. A level 9 civilization wasn't necessarily a god-tier civilization, but a god-tier civilization was definitely level 9. It couldn't be faked. The painting bore the artist's mark, as well as the imprint of a level 9 civilization. Just a passing glance was enough to make one feel an endless, crushing pressure. Relying on these items, he slowly opened his first auction house. Thanks to the sheer rarity of his goods, he quickly made a name for himself in the industry. Everyone was curious about his sourcing channels. Only he knew the truth. He had struck the ultimate jackpot. Fate had favored him. For the first time, he felt that the goddess of fortune truly existed. Because the very first item to appear in the drawer was a telescope that had been upgraded to level 10. From that exact moment, the wheels of fate slowly began to turn. Later on, as he got busier and his empire grew larger, the items appeared more frequently. The only thing he never sold was that telescope. It always sat on his desk. First, because it wouldn't sell for much anyway. Second, because it was the first gift fate had bestowed upon him. It held too much sentimental value. His life had taken a completely different turn from that very moment. But then, one day, the telescope suddenly vanished. He searched high and low for a long time, but couldn't find it. At the time, he was both furious and terrified. He wasn't just afraid of losing a telescope. He was terrified that fate had revoked its favor, that from then on, this drawer would never spit out another cosmic gift, that his newly flourishing life would plummet back to rock bottom. Reading up to this point, Chen Mang's heart sank. A familiar chill ran down his spine. Once someone tasted the privilege of being chosen, the most terrifying thing wasn't losing their possessions. It was losing the reason they were chosen in the first place. Fortunately, perhaps because he had suffered enough, the goddess of fortune didn't subject him to further disaster. He locked himself in his study for 3 days. During those 3 days, the drawer continuously churned out a massive amount of cosmic gifts without stopping. Only then did he truly feel at ease. The goddess of fortune was still with him. That's right, he called those things cosmic gifts. He didn't know where they came from, nor did he understand why they appeared in his drawer. Until one day, the old man's cloudy pupils seemed to lose focus, his thoughts drifting far away as he stared at the blurring handwriting on the paper. That was perhaps the biggest crisis he faced after starting his business. Ever since he got rich, he always tried to keep a low profile, knowing full well his sourcing channels weren't exactly orthodox. It absolutely couldn't be exposed. Otherwise, someone would definitely come to rob him. He tried to stay as low-key as possible, but trouble still found him. During one auction, someone suddenly stood up and pointedly asked why all the auction items this time were cosmic contraband. At the time, he didn't even know what the concept of cosmic contraband was. He just hurriedly stepped out to explain. Only later did he learn that there was a special existence in the universe called a space-time rift. These rifts were like cuts on human skin. They appeared occasionally and usually led to the past. However, the time gap wouldn't be too far, the rifts didn't last long, and they were usually confined to extremely narrow spaces. They couldn't alter the timeline, so they were considered a moderate bug in the universe. If he had received a proper education, these things would have been taught by teachers in school. Unfortunately, he didn't have much schooling, so he was clueless about this so-called common knowledge. Later, he heard people say that if you threw a normal item into a space-time rift, that item would travel back to the past, and at that exact moment, it would become a bug in the universe. Because theoretically, that item had appeared in the wrong temporal coordinates, a period of time it didn't belong to. Therefore, it was called cosmic contraband, an erroneous existence in the universe. It could still be used like a normal item, but its classification changed, and that name alone was enough to make one's blood run cold. Chen Meng frowned as he read this, his heart heavy. An item in the wrong time that still managed to exist. Then what was anchoring it to reality? What kind of law was it? Or was it something that transcended the laws altogether? The more he thought about it, the more unsettling it felt. Because once something went against the grain without being crushed, it either had someone backing it, or it was the loophole itself. And his drawer was the truly terrifying part. The drawer was his lifeline. It was the thing that could cause countless cosmic contraband items in the universe to randomly appear right inside it. Of course, there were quite a few unexpected accidents. Once, an item he auctioned off suddenly vanished from the buyer's safe, only to inexplicably reappear in his drawer. Handling that mess was quite a headache, but he eventually smoothed things over without causing too much of a stir. He didn't know who coined the term cosmic contraband, but he always felt things weren't that simple, because the contraband part wasn't just a label. Through the drawer, he also received a lot of documents and historical records from various civilizations. Despite his lack of higher education, his knowledge of current cosmic civilizations rivaled that of university professors. Looking at these lines, a chilling conclusion immediately formed in Chen Meng's mind. This old man wasn't just rich. He was sitting on a massive data vault, enough to drive any faction insane. He knew that some civilizations had spent astronomical sums to acquire cosmic contraband, regardless of the type. They even hired the Goblin civilization to find a space-time rift and throw a massive amount of items into it. Then, they'd have the Goblins go in and retrieve the items that had turned into contraband, effectively mass-producing cosmic contraband. In the universe, only the Goblin civilization and cultivation civilizations could pass through space-time rifts. Goblins could almost ignore the effects of the flow of time, while cultivators had lifespans long enough to resist the erosion of time. Others couldn't enter. If they did, they would age instantly and die of old age before they could even come back out. Passing through a space-time rift with a physical body was incredibly difficult. The same went for spaceships. Chen Meng let out a slow breath as he read this, feeling like he had just touched a forbidden wire. Something that level 9 civilizations were frantically hunting down couldn't just be about rare items. It had to involve secrets, or power, or a shortcut that could change the entire landscape for whoever grasped it. The old man continued writing, as if reminding himself of the only method to unravel the universe's secrets. Find the differences, then find the commonalities. The civilizations that had frantically purchased or manufactured cosmic contraband were all pure level 9 civilizations. This piece of information alone was enough to show the level of danger. The Nanmei civilization was only a level 5 civilization. He had once visited the civilization's library, a place with high-level clearance and an immense wealth of knowledge. Most of the information the Nanmei civilization had discovered about other civilizations was stored there. The library wasn't open to the public. Its main function was inheritance, and only special personnel were allowed inside. He had been inside, but the data on higher-tier civilizations was pitifully scarce. Even for level 6 civilizations, just one level higher, there was almost nothing. Just a one-level gap, and the information barrier was already crushing. Their understanding of higher-tier civilizations was even less than his. Reading this, Chen Meng grew even more certain. This drawer didn't just spit out items, it spat out the right to know. And in the universe, knowing was often more valuable than weapons. That was also why the painting from the level 9 civilization had auctioned for such an astronomical price. He had just started his business back then and didn't realize its true value. He almost caused a massive disaster. Although the money from the painting ultimately didn't fall into his hands and was taken by someone else, he still gained quite a few opportunities because of it. From then on, his career took off as if he were being guided, and he became a renowned businessman. It was just that later on, when he got his hands on items related to higher-tier civilizations, he didn't dare sell them anymore. The prices were too high, he wouldn't make much anyway, and it was too easy to invite disaster. A business couldn't grow too big. If it grew too big, it was no longer his business, but someone else's. In this civilization, civilian armed forces were strictly limited. To him, the civilization was like an insurmountable mountain. No matter how much he earned, he was still just a walking blood bag. Whenever the children of the higher-ups wanted to start a business, he had to step aside and make room for them. A chill ran down Chen Meng's spine as he read this, because he understood that feeling. There were some things where it wasn't about not being good enough. It was that no matter how good you were only allowed to stand on the sidelines, because the rules of the game were never written for people like you. The old man sighed, looking tiredly at the books on his desk. Even though his lifespan could still be extended for a very long time, he was already preparing for his son to gradually take over the business. He wasn't like many others who had a bunch of kids and then picked the perfect heir. Perhaps because he started from nothing, he valued family ties more. He didn't want to see his children slaughtering each other over an inheritance. One child was enough. One child to inherit everything. And his secret, too. He wasn't short on money. He had so much money it could rival an entire nation. To put it bluntly, the total assets of a level 3 civilization combined probably couldn't match his wealth. But he didn't dare spend it, nor did he have anywhere to spend it. If he didn't build spaceships, his current assets were enough for him to live in extreme luxury for nearly 1,000,000 years, maxing out every possible living condition. Of course, he didn't tell his son they were this rich, mostly because he couldn't. He was also afraid of scaring the boy. Once, he gathered the children of a group of level 4 suppliers, wanting his son to play with them so he wouldn't be so lonely. But his son bluntly said those kids were just rich brats. Their manners and work habits annoyed him. They were too flashy. Hearing that, he felt truly helpless. He found it both funny and bitter. Those were just the kids of level 4 suppliers. Above them were level 3, level 2, and level 1. All of them relied on him to make a living. So who was the real rich brat here? Chen Meng fell silent for a moment. He understood that this kind of wealth wasn't about money. It was a wealth of danger, a wealth of covetous eyes, a wealth of invisible traps waiting to snap shut at any moment. The gifts of fate had actually been secretly priced long ago. Even though the desk hadn't demanded anything from him yet, he always had a feeling that one day, when the desk finally spoke up, Its demand would be something he couldn't refuse, with no way out. He didn't know how much longer he had to live. He just wanted his son to inherit the estate and the true fortune as soon as possible. He never believed anything in this world was free, but he had no other choice. As long as his wife and son could live happily and joyfully, without having to bow their heads for money, that was enough. He was willing to trade anything for it. Chen Mang felt a heaviness in his chest. There were people so rich they didn't dare spend it, not because they were stingy, but because they knew perfectly well that if they spent it in the wrong place, their entire life would be dragged out and treated as public property. What do you think? Inside a spaceship cabin parked in the pseudo-four-dimensional space of the universe, a young man with long hair suddenly pondered, then tilted his head and asked, "Boss, his dad is paying us so much, or why don't we just kidnap him? Wouldn't we make way more? We could retire after this one job." The scarred man in the pilot's seat glanced over, his voice cold and firm. In this line of work, the biggest taboo is saying you'll retire after one last job. Usually, after saying that, things never end peacefully. He emphasized his words. "How many times have I taught you? Stick to the rules of the trade. If you take a job, see it through. That's how you eat well and sleep soundly. Keep life simple, and it's easier to be happy." Then he lifted his chin toward the alert panel. "Look, pirates again. They're here. Get ready to move." The long-haired man scratched his head in frustration. "You've got to be kidding me. Why do pirates keep swarming this mining planet? Staying in pseudo-four-dimensional space burns resources too. With this many pirates, aren't we going to take a loss on this job?" The scarred man smirked. "An escort fee of 100 billion a day. If you can still take a loss on this, then you really should retire. Shut up and get to work." Finally fixed. On the mining planet, a young, chubby guy satisfyingly finished tuning his mining mech, stretched lazily, and looked up at the sun directly overhead. The weather was nice today. He had deliberately chosen a mining planet near a star. It paid a bit less, but it was much more comfortable. Some mining planets had environments so harsh they were unbearable. Even if the profits were higher, humans simply couldn't survive there. It was just a bit strange. When he first arrived, he heard that pirates frequently raided these mining planets, sweeping them clean of all mined ores. He was worried at first, but it had been so long and he hadn't seen a single pirate. Did the pirates skip this place? Or were there actually not that many pirates in the universe? Thinking this, he reassured himself. Makes sense. Being a pirate is too dangerous. Doing honest work might not pay as much, but at least it's a peaceful life. Inside the planetary spaceship, Chun Meng returned to work mode after his health regimen and stress relief. He looked at the radar screen, calmly observing the main energy cannon, a cannon, flying through the cosmic void. It was estimated to take tens of thousands of years to reach the Naya star system. After flying for tens of millions, perhaps even hundreds of millions of years, a cannon's power had swelled to an absurd degree. Once it reached Naya, it would likely obliterate the star system instantly, and the destruction would spread even further, plunging the surrounding sectors into chaotic instability for tens of thousands of years. But if you ignored the impending destruction and just looked at it visually, it was truly a spectacular sight. Chun Meng relaxed his shoulders, his mind cold and practical. The distance was too vast. That was a problem for tens of thousands of years from now. By then, who knew where he'd be drifting? No need to scare himself for now. He shifted his gaze to the Zerg civilization. Still quiet. It seemed they weren't ready yet, which was perfect because he needed more time too. He checked the mining progress of the planetary group. It was almost done. With the efficiency of a massive number of mining mechs, the progress was remarkably fast. Notably, the nearly 10,000 civilizations in the Kesha Civilization Federation had completely polarized into two extremes. The civilizations that confirmed adopting a non-resistance policy had all relocated to Star System 27, the one closest to the Zerg civilization. Over the past few days, he had also received quite a few invitations for discussion sent to the human civilization. It was just that they couldn't contact him directly, so they had to pass messages through forums and other channels. Chen Meng ignored them all. It wasn't time to negotiate yet, and honestly, he didn't want to be dragged into someone else's rhythm. Once you let them lead, you lose the initiative. Just as he was about to scroll through the recent intel one more time, A refrigerator in the corner of the spaceship cabin suddenly flashed a red light. This refrigerator connected to the Starfire civilization. Inside, a power cable was hooked up to a red light bulb, flashing to warn him that something had triggered the communication line, and this time, it might not be a small matter. If the Starfire civilization had an urgent message, they would turn on the red light. A simple but highly effective communication method. Power cables were a rather primitive way to transmit signals, but placing them inside a refrigerator was oddly fitting. Almost perfect. With enough cables, they could communicate instantly across countless light years, much more convenient than threading cables through wormholes. Plus, there were no harsh environments inside the fridge, making it stable and safe. Chun Meng raised an eyebrow, immediately set his work aside, and quickly stepped into the refrigerator with Xiao AI and the others, heading straight to the Starfire civilization. As soon as he arrived, he saw the Starfire leader looking pale, his footsteps frantic as if he were running from something. The man rushed over, his voice losing its usual composure. Chun Meng, we've got a huge problem. He explained that the Starfire civilization had always relied on random wormholes to drift through the corners of the universe. That was the ability of the cosmic behemoth right beneath their feet. But this time, it seemed they had been thrown into a place that was anything but ordinary. The random teleportation ability couldn't be used continuously, nor could it be actively toggled. It was entirely a passive behavior of the Xuanwu. Even the beast itself couldn't control it. A flash of surprise crossed Chun Meng's eyes. He knew the Starfire civilization wandered via random teleportation, but he hadn't expected it to be completely out of their control. It felt like an enhanced version of Mengda's ability in terms of range, but severely nerfed in terms of control. Mengda could control his random teleportation, but the range was small, limited to a single planet. He couldn't jump wildly across the universe. By that logic, this cosmic behemoth named Xuanwu, had it basically been thrown far away right after birth, separated from its parents? The thought flashed by, cold and sharp, but Chun Meng didn't have time to dig deeper, because a sense of urgency was pressing hard against the back of his neck. He followed the direction the Starfire leader was pointing into the distance, and his entire body instantly stiffened. His mouth felt open involuntarily. Only then did he understand why the man was in such a rush. Even, almost panicking. The sight before him was too shocking, shattering all common sense. Bright. It was so bright it felt like it was burning his eyes. The entire sky was ablaze. Within that sea of light, a colossal mass faintly emerged, taking up almost his entire field of vision. Yet its shape was clearly that of a palace. Yes, a palace. Despite the vast distance, its surface structure was visible, like those massive pillars, for instance. It was unimaginable just how tall and massive they had to be seen so clearly from this far away. The space-time on the surface of the palace was even faintly distorted, creating a dazzling, dizzying spectacle. The palace reflected the starlight, making it the brightest object in the night sky. Chun Meng swallowed hard. A very uncomfortable feeling rose in his chest. This wasn't something beautiful. It was something so beautiful it was dangerous. The kind of danger that made you want to turn and run, yet kept you rooted in place out of sheer curiosity. He understood why the Starfire leader was so terrified. What did it mean for something like this to appear here? Where exactly had they been thrown? Wait for me. I'm bringing the ship over. Chun Meng didn't waste words. He turned and walked quickly back to the refrigerator. The naked eye couldn't see much. He had to use the radar to scan it thoroughly. Very quickly, he piloted the ship over, and the Heavenly Palace immediately appeared on the Doppler radar screen, along with its related data. This palace was incredibly massive, almost the size of the Cerulean planet. Calling it a heavenly palace was truly no exaggeration. There was no way this thing was naturally formed by the universe, even though the universe could birth all sorts of bizarre things. An object with such obvious signs of sculpting was 99% likely created by a civilization. It couldn't have just sprouted from nothingness. Chun Meng stared at the data, his heart tight and cold. If this belongs to someone else, then where are they? Are they sleeping? Or are they watching? He hated the feeling of being placed on a chessboard before he even understood the rules. He pointed at the external screen and told the Starfire leader, "The radar shows no life signals. It looks like there's no one inside. There are two possibilities. One, there really is no one. 2. My radar can't detect them. His Doppler radar was at level 200, with a range of 100,000 light-years. For a level 2 civilization, it was definitely more than enough. In fact, his current resources were enough to upgrade it to level 500, but he didn't plan on doing that anymore. Ever since he learned about the existence of cosmic landmines, he felt like the entire universe was a game of Minesweeper. A higher-level radar wasn't necessarily a good thing. Who knew what kind of mines he might scan? Level 200 was enough for now. He couldn't be too greedy. It was just that reason was suppressing his desires, while emotion was pulling hard in the opposite direction. Chen Meng knew he was being tempted. A heavenly palace floating in the middle of the universe. Who could resist the urge to go closer and take a look? What if it was an abandoned secret base of a high-tier civilization, packed full of treasures and wealth? The moment that thought flashed, his heart skipped a beat, only to be immediately doused by a cold wave of reality. The greater the treasure, the more likely it's bait. Probably. No one's there. The Starfire leader finally breathed a sigh of relief, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He spoke the truth. The moment the random teleportation brought them to this sector, his soul nearly left his body. His first reaction was that he had crashed straight into the lair of some high-tier civilization. That was why he immediately contacted Chen Meng, planning to flee to Chen Meng's territory first to secure an escape route. Chen Meng's scanning equipment also yielded the same conclusion. The heavenly palace was empty. He gradually calmed down. If there really was someone there, their sudden appearance would definitely bring trouble. At the very least, someone would have come to question them on the spot. That's great then. The Starfire leader immediately turned to leave. Where are you going? Chen Meng held him back. Running the other way, then waiting for the next random teleportation to get out of here as fast as possible. Don't you want to go up and take a look? No. The Starfire leader shook his head decisively. The third law of cosmic survival. All curiosity is a curse from the Grim Reaper. I'm really not curious. Not at all. Chen Meng fell silent, just tilting his head to look at the massive heavenly palace that took up nearly half the sky, his eyes filled with hesitation. He really wanted to explore it, but that thing was clearly a relic left behind by some high-tier civilization. Even if it might be empty inside, who could guarantee there wasn't something nameless left behind? To a low-tier civilization, a high-tier civilization was a dimensional crushing force. Not just crushing in terms of stats, but crushing in rules, in methods, in ways of killing that you couldn't even begin to comprehend. Thinking of this, Chen Meng felt his heart clench, his feet rooted to the spot. He didn't dare, yet he couldn't bear to let it go. A long time passed. Finally, he took out a few refrigerators from the ship and tossed them deep into space, letting them drift freely as markers. In the end, he gave up on going in to explore. The danger was too great, and it was a completely unknown entity. He didn't know what was inside, and he didn't want to gamble his life on a maybe. But he didn't completely give up either. He'd leave a few refrigerators behind first. In a few days, he'd find some brave warriors to go up and scout the palace, or wait until he was stronger and come back. Chen Meng tilted his head and asked the Starfire leader, "What do you think that thing is? An entertainment venue for the elites of a high-tier civilization? Or the cosmic tomb of some big shot?" "Doesn't look like either." The Starfire leader shook his head. "I think it looks more like a civilization tomb." "What's a civilization tomb?" "When some civilizations realize they can't escape extinction, they gather their entire history, culture, and anything that can be passed down into one place, then let it drift through the universe, waiting for the day another civilization finds it. Consider it leaving their mark on the universe." He said this was a common practice. Many civilizations wanted their history to be passed on, even if the civilization itself perished. Chen Meng nodded. He understood that obsession. The princess of the mechanical civilization, before her civilization's destruction, only wanted to preserve their true history. Chen Meng asked further, his voice sounding like he was trying to convince himself. "If that's the case, shouldn't it be full of good stuff inside?" The Starfire leader still shook his head. "Hard to say. If it really is a civilization tomb, and it's that massive, the civilization's tier definitely wasn't low. Usually, civilization tombs set up layers of trials to prevent overly weak civilizations from entering. In other words, whether it's a civilization tomb or not, it's full of countless dangers inside. My advice is to stay away. In the universe, No matter how great the opportunity, it won't grant you immortality. But even the slightest danger is enough to ensure you don't see tomorrow's sun. He compared opportunities and dangers to mixing shit with chocolate. You couldn't swallow a mouthful of shit just for one piece of chocolate. Chen Mang turned to look at him, his expression a bit strange. I've noticed your life principles really have a very distinct flavor. It gets the job done, the Starfire leader replied deadpan. In the end, Chen Mang didn't go explore the unknown heavenly palace this time. He just left the refrigerators as markers, then piloted the planetary ship back to the Naya star system. The Starfire leader also quickly steered Xuanwu away from the area. Chen Mang had met many people, but someone who walked the talk as absolutely as the Starfire leader was a first for him. Everyone has principles, but in the face of temptation, not many can stick to them to the end. Even he, who was always cautious, couldn't suppress the urge to sneak into the heavenly palace. But the Starfire leader had absolutely no such thoughts. He just wanted to run, refusing to get even a little bit closer. Thinking of this, Chen Mang found it both amusing and admirable. Because in this universe, the hardest thing wasn't setting principles, but keeping them when the thing right in front of you was enough to blind you. Inside the cabin, Xiao AI's voice rang out. It said that the palace seemed to be coated in some kind of paint that made it glow brightly in the universe. From a design perspective, it wasn't exactly a good choice. At the very least, it was too bright, like a firefly in the dark night, as if afraid others wouldn't spot it. Not necessarily. Chen Mang shook his head, speaking slowly. The Doppler radar can scan the heavenly palace clearly, which means it doesn't have stealth equipment, or that equipment has lost its function. A level 200 Doppler radar isn't common in the universe, but if any civilization was nearby, they'd definitely spot the heavenly palace. The problem is, when they passed through, there wasn't a single civilization within 100,000 light-years. Plenty of planets, but no civilizations. Chen Mang had left quite a few refrigerators there. Once they finished mining the resources in the Naya star system, perhaps they could consider moving to that sector. The massive amount of resource-rich mining planets there could become their source of nourishment. The only thing they had to figure out was why there were no civilizations in that sector, and what exactly that heavenly palace was. Speaking of this, Chen Mang felt his heart skip a beat again, a mix of desire and vigilance. He didn't want to be dragged into the heavenly palace's rules, but he also didn't want to miss an answer that could change the game later on. A major reason Chen Mang maintained such a good relationship with the Starfire civilization was their random teleportation ability. It was like a higher-tier ecosystem of Mengda's power. This civilization kept getting thrown all over the universe, and thanks to that, he could continuously drop refrigerators out there. To put it bluntly, if the human civilization truly faced an unavoidable catastrophe, as long as it wasn't a timeline reset, he'd still have a way out. If he happened to find a good sector, that would be his new starting point. Like the sector just now, there weren't many mining planets, but the upside was that there wasn't a single civilization. No one to fight over it. It would all be his. Everything looked safe at first glance. It was just that, not having a single civilization within 100,000 light-years, no matter how small, was definitely not an optimistic sign. Chen Mang stopped talking, just staring at the data on the control screen, lost in thought. A faint feeling rose in his heart, like he was stepping to the edge of a pit whose bottom he couldn't even see. But the very next moment, the refrigerator in the corner of the cabin flashed red again. Again? A flash of doubt crossed Chen Mang's eyes. He immediately pulled Xiao AI and the others over to the Starfire civilization. As soon as he arrived, the Starfire leader was frozen like a statue, trembling violently, his finger pointing straight at the horizon. Chen Mang followed his gaze, and then he too froze on the spot. Where did they get thrown to this time? Did you guys randomly teleport again? Didn't you say you couldn't teleport twice in such a short time? No, we didn't. Then where's the heavenly palace? It suddenly disappeared? Wait, what do you mean suddenly disappeared? The Starfire leader raised both hands and snapped his fingers hard, like flicking off a light switch. Like this. Without a single sound. It just vanished into thin air. Chen Mang took the surveillance video. In the footage, the heavenly palace truly disappeared in the most literal sense. No shaking, no explosion, no warning signs. Just a blink of an eye, and it was gone. He stayed silent for a long time. For something that massive to disappear like that, it completely defied his understanding. Only now did he feel lucky he hadn't stepped inside earlier. Otherwise, who knows where he'd be thrown right now, or if he'd be swallowed into some place of no return. Chun Mang gritted his teeth inwardly, a chill running down his spine. This universe is really getting crazier by the day. Why do these messed up things keep popping up? It's like they're deliberately pushing people to their deaths. Right at that moment, countless light years away, in the northern territory of the Nanmei civilization, in a study on a certain planet, the old man was writing with his head down when he suddenly felt the drawer vibrate slightly. He immediately understood and pulled the drawer open. The drawer had brought a new cosmic gift. Only this time, something seemed different. He pulled it open, but it was empty. There was absolutely nothing inside. He frowned, reaching in to feel around every inch of the drawer. Could it be that the goddess of fortune's favor has run out? No more gifts from now on. Or is this thing invisible and intangible? An extremely rare type of gift? The value of the cosmic gifts was completely random. Sometimes it was just a useless rock. The daily quantity was random too. Everything was random. Because of this, he didn't dare jump to conclusions, but he felt an emptiness in his heart, as if a pillar of support had been yanked away. Right then, a piercing alarm suddenly blared outside the study. The old man stiffened and looked out the window. No, the alarm is ringing across the entire city. He looked outside. People on the streets were all looking up at the sky, as if their attention had been sucked away by something. He followed their gaze and slowly looked up at the sky. In that moment, his entire body froze, his eyes filled with a mix of terror and disbelief. Above the atmosphere, an incomparably massive palace, shining as bright as a star, had appeared out of nowhere, taking up nearly half the sky. The only stroke of luck was that it was hovering, not falling. And faintly, the old man sensed that this newly appeared object was the cosmic contraband the drawer had brought back this time. It was just that. Its volume was too massive to fit in the drawer, so it changed its method of appearance, directly hanging suspended in midair. The old man's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed dryly, his eyes revealing a look of bewilderment. The cosmic gift this time. Isn't it a bit too oversized? The drawer had brought back things that exceeded its capacity before, but they were usually never this big, and they would appear inside the study, not appear in the middle of the sky like a looming disaster. Among the items that had appeared, the one he auctioned for an astronomical price was a painting by an artist from a level 9 civilization. It had no practical value, but its added value was an astronomical figure. As for this time, the palace hanging in the sky above this planet would very likely break that record. This was clearly not something an ordinary civilization was capable of building. It was almost the size of a planet. At least with the strength of the Nanmei civilization, building such a colossal palace was practically impossible. Most importantly, there was no visible propulsion system, yet it hovered in the sky, as if gravity were just a joke, and the rules were whatever it decided. The old man fell silent, his expression complex. He knew he absolutely couldn't step forward to claim this item, because the moment he did, his secret would be completely exposed. Even though he didn't know what was inside that palace, its value was definitely not low. It was a pity, truly a pity, but a chilling doubt rose in his heart. The things that could appear in his drawer were all cosmic contraband. And cosmic contraband were things that had fallen into a space-time rift. For a palace this massive to fall in, just how gigantic must that rift have been? He had never seen, nor even heard of, a space-time rift that large. The larger the rift, the faster the flow of time inside usually was, and the further back into the past it would send things. With a rift that terrifyingly huge, the time gap had to span at least tens of thousands of years. In other words, that palace was very likely thrown from tens of thousands of years in the future back to the present. But who would be crazy enough to throw that thing into a space-time rift? And for what purpose? The old man's eyes were full of confusion. He had weathered many storms in his life, yet facing this scene, he still felt lost, not knowing how to handle it. He even started to wonder, if the civilization sent people up to explore it, what exactly would happen? And what was inside? A few minutes later, he returned to his study and began packing up. He gathered all the documents on his desk and stacked them on the bookshelf. In one of the most recent documents, there was a line that made his blood run cold. cosmic contraband possesses uniqueness. When the past state and the present state of a contraband item collide, an unpredictable crisis will be born. The longer the time the contraband has crossed, the greater the magnitude of the crisis. Cosmic contraband always exists in two states, past and present. It sounds confusing, but the meaning is actually very simple to understand. For example, you have a unique pack of cigarettes. You're about to throw it into a space-time rift. At that moment, the pack of cigarettes is in its present state. When you throw it into the rift, it travels back to the past. At this point, it becomes its past state. Once the pack is thrown, the present state disappears, leaving only the past state. But if, by coincidence, right before you manage to throw it, the person who picked up the pack in the past suddenly appears right in front of you, causing the pack in the present and the pack in the past to meet, then an unpredictable crisis will be born. Normally, the chances of this happening are extremely low, but the universe is too vast. No matter how small the probability, it can become reality. After gathering enough documents from high-tier civilizations, the old man discovered something else that made his heart pound heavily. High-tier civilizations could use all sorts of methods to travel back to the past. They could even travel back millions of years to fire an A-cannon, launching a cross-temporal strike from the past aimed at the present. But no civilization had ever interfered with the future. Not just interfered, there wasn't even a single clue. The future was absolutely untouchable, let alone controllable. Not even for level 9 civilizations. In the documents he possessed, there were only speculations and hypotheses from level 9 scientists about the future, but no actual signs from the future. Because of this, he always thought that if the past state and the present state met, perhaps it would give birth to a future state. At the very least, one might catch a glimpse of the future. To know what their civilization would become in the future, what crises they would face. This was likely what all level 9 or god-tier civilizations wanted to know the most. Perhaps that was why they hoarded cosmic contraband so aggressively, or maybe they wanted to rely on it to break through to the god tier. As for him, he could only speculate about the future using the data he scavenged, with no way to actually touch it. The old man quietly rearranged the papers on his desk. Some things were better left unsaid to anyone. On a blank sheet of paper, the word future was circled in red ink, glaringly prominent, like a lipstick mark on fear itself. On the other side, Chen Mang stood at the Starfire civilization, looking at the scene before him with vague confusion. Then he shook his head. Forget it. Gone is gone. Might even be a good thing. After all, no one knows what dangers that palace holds. Just hanging there, it makes you want to explore it every single day. But if it's gone, then there's no need to explore it anymore. He said that, but Chen Mang still felt a bit uneasy. Not because he pitied the loss, but because of the feeling of being toyed with by something right in front of his eyes. I'm only allowed to look, not allowed to understand. Afterward, he returned to the planetary ship. Yet another chaotic, head-scratching mess. It felt like ever since he left his comfort zone, he kept running into these bizarre things, each one reminding him that in this universe, he was still as insignificant as a speck of dust. Chen Mang sat down, looking at the image of the heavenly palace still saved on the control screen, and frowned. He really couldn't understand what kind of civilization could build such a massive palace. And most importantly, build it for what? A palace that big would be ridiculously inconvenient to live in. He thought idly, if a maid and a guard fell in love, they probably wouldn't even see each other for half a year or a year. Just walking from one room to another would be exhausting enough to kill you. Right at that moment, Xiao Ai's voice rang out in the cabin. Captain, Daba invited you over. He said he prepared a surprise for you. Chen Mang raised an eyebrow, casually tossing the palace matter aside. At least this sounded more grounded, easier to breathe. He smiled and stood up, walking out of the control room. Let's go. Let's see what surprise Daba has prepared. Is today some special day? Very quickly, Chen Mang appeared on the rooftop of an office building in a city on the Cerulean planet. This was a city exclusively for the goblin race. Although the population was extremely small, it was a promise he had made to Daba, to give Daba and the others a place that truly belonged to them. Chen Mang squinted down at the streets, seeing quite a few goblin kids running around between the buildings, and his heart softened. He chuckled softly. These goblin kids really are cute. In recent years, the goblin race had given birth to quite a few children. Even stranger, some of the tribesmen who had lost their minds seemed to gradually regain their intellect after having kids. They still couldn't compare to normal people, but they were much better than before. Chen Meng originally intended to enjoy this peaceful moment a bit longer, but as soon as he turned around, he noticed Da Ba was unusually solemn today, without a hint of a smile on his face. Da Ba took a deep breath, looked up at him, and spoke slowly and clearly, "Captain Chen, do you still remember what I said to you before?" Without waiting for an answer, as if afraid he might lose his nerve, Da Ba immediately repeated every word. His eyes shone with a determination that bordered on stubbornness. "I believe that one day, the goblin race will definitely complete our reconstruction under your guidance. When that time comes, the goblins will be your most loyal subjects. We will also build you a palace, both safe and luxurious, deep underground, so that your glory will forever shine upon the deepest depths." Da Ba paused for a beat, then emphasized as if sealing an oath, "I said those exact words to you in the doomsday abyss." Chen Meng was slightly taken aback, old memories flipping open like a page in a book. He laughed, both surprised and amused by Da Ba's seriousness. "I remember. What? Are you really building a palace for me?" To be honest, back then he thought Da Ba was just painting a pretty picture to boost morale. The time from the doomsday abyss to the present felt so long that sometimes he felt like a whole lifetime had passed. Back then, his planetary ship was still weak, and the addition of Da Ba and the other goblins had helped him immensely, especially with the noticeable increase in mining speed. Da Ba broke into a smile so wide it almost took up his entire face, then answered firmly, "Da Ba never breaks a promise." With that, Da Ba waved his hand, his voice ringing with pride. "The goblins will forever be glorious, forever prosperous under the captain's light." At that exact moment, the massive central park located in the heart of the city suddenly began to rise slowly. A series of mechanical gears grinding together echoed loudly. The entire park seemed to detach from the ground, lifted by a mechanism hidden long ago. Just a few seconds later, a magnificent golden palace appeared right in the center, completely replacing the park. The trees and vegetation that originally belonged to the park were arranged systematically around the palace, making the whole structure look both lush and majestic. Chen Meng stared at the scene before him, his mouth falling open involuntarily. He was truly hit hard by this sudden surprise. Just a moment ago, he was about to say he didn't need a palace, but seeing it rise from the ground like a materialized promise, he suddenly realized, men find it very hard to refuse moving into a palace. There was no visible light source outside, yet the palace still radiated a brilliant golden glow. It sat right in the center of the city, as if casting glory down every street. Whether in terms of politics or design, this structure was nearly perfect. There was nothing to nitpick. It took a long while for Chen Meng to snap back to reality. He happily patted Da Ba on the shoulder, smiling genuinely. "Thank you, Da Ba. I really love this gift." Hearing this, Da Ba was visibly thrilled, scratching the back of his head a bit shyly. This is the joint effort of Mengda, Fuliyu, and all the goblins over this period of time. In the distance, Fuliyu was also standing at the edge of the rooftop with his hands on his hips, looking at his masterpiece with a smug expression. A string of very real happiness rippled through his heart. Not being a pirate is definitely awesome. Living with my people is even more awesome. Having a goblin wife is the most awesome. And if we have another goblin kid, that would probably be the awesomest. Da Ba remembered something else and immediately added, "We also have to thank Chief AI. If it weren't for Chief AI's help, we wouldn't have been able to finish this palace so quickly." Chen Meng tilted his head to look at Xiao AI standing next to him, half joking, half scolding. "Pretty good, huh? You even know how to keep secrets from me now? For an AI, this trick isn't exactly a good sign." Xiao AI bowed its head slightly, its voice soft and steady. "I evaluated that in human emotions, a gift requires an element of surprise, so it should be kept secret. However, if the captain wishes, I can reset my parameters. I won't hide things on my own initiative anymore." Chen Meng waved his hand, not wanting a small matter to dilute the joy. He just stood there admiring the palace, a sense of satisfaction spreading through his chest. It was much smaller than the palace floating in space he had seen today, and it couldn't compare in grandeur, but he still liked it, because this palace was something that truly belonged to him. Right then, Daba spoke up again, as if wanting to show off his merits one more time. He pulled a new blueprint from his coat, holding it up with both hands, his eyes shining. Captain Chun, this is only the first palace we've built for you. It absolutely won't be the last. One day, your glory will shine across the entire universe. Shin-Mang looked at the blueprint, then back at the palace that had just risen from the ground. He didn't speak immediately, just feeling a very deep, quiet beat in his heart. Sometimes, what makes a person stronger isn't ambition, but the feeling that someone truly places their future in your hands and believes in you to the very end. Billions of living beings across the entire universe will eventually listen to your words. The boss spoke as if he were seeing a very distant future. In the future, we will build this ultimate palace to present to Captain Chen. It's just that it's very hard to do in the short term, but I believe the goblin civilization will eventually reach that day under your guidance. Daba's voice was full of expectation. Mengda, standing nearby, also scratched his head and smiled foolishly in agreement. Only Chun Mang, after taking the blueprint, felt the smile on his face slowly stiffen, and a flash of terror crossed his eyes. Not because the ambition was too grand, but because of a familiar feeling that sent a chill down his spine. It was as if he had already seen the completed form of this blueprint. It looked at least 70% like the heavenly palace he had seen at the Starfire civilization. The same colossal size, the same floating in space. Even the massive round pillars in the front were almost identical, and the patterns on them were unbelievably similar. Shin Mang stood still, his face expressionless, but his mind was quietly clenching. If this isn't a coincidence, then who exactly is guiding who? Daba, who had been excited, saw that expression and immediately fell silent with caution, not understanding what he had touched upon to make the captain change his face. A long time later, Chun Mang tilted his head to look at Xiao Ai, his voice dropping. Did you show Daba the image of that heavenly palace? Xiao Ai also realized the severity of the situation and quickly shook its head. No, I had absolutely no knowledge of this blueprint. Daba never mentioned it to me, and I certainly didn't show him any images of that heavenly palace. Chun Mang shifted his gaze to Daba. This blueprint, did you have any reference ideas? Any reference models? Although Daba didn't understand what was going on, he could feel the pressure in the air. He shook his head stiffly, his voice hoarse. No, Captain. The palace in the blueprint is the result of everyone discussing it together. It's a palace big enough, a palace that can ensure there's light even in deep space, regardless of whether there are stars nearby or not. A palace that only exists in imagination, one we can't build for the time being. Chun Mang looked at the lines on the blueprint, his heart growing heavier. He pointed at the patterns. These patterns, what do they mean? Daba lowered his head, his voice as quiet as a mosquito. That's the patternization of the ancient goblin language. The meaning is, the unchanging cosmic god of all ages reigns here. The civilization that never decays through 10,000 eons originates here. All races that come here must kneel and submit. Where this palace stands as the center of the universe. Those who revere shall exist. Those who question shall be destroyed. Time submits here. Space coils here. Karma is written here. Fate is decided here. Past and future all converge at this moment. All things ultimately return to silence. Only this palace is eternal. Speaking up to this point, Daba lowered his voice even more, sounding both like he was showing off and afraid of being laughed at. That was a little personal touch of mine. Carving these ancient words onto the captain's palace so that outside civilizations will understand that the goblin civilization is bound to Chun Mang by a special relationship. Currently, everyone on the ship belongs to the human civilization. Only our goblin civilization doesn't directly belong to the human civilization. And that difference always gives Daba an indescribable sense of crisis and urgency. Chun Mang remained silent for a very long time. Finally, he took a tablet from Xiao Ai's hands. He opened the photo he took of the patterns on the heavenly palace he saw today and handed it to Daba. Take a look for me. Are these patterns your ancient goblin language? Daba took the tablet. A flash of confusion crossed his eyes, which then turned into shock. It is the ancient goblin language. Moreover, this sentence means past and future all converge at this moment. This sentence. I thought about it for a long time before coming up with it. Where did the captain get this goblin language from? How does it match mine so perfectly? What a headache. Chen Mang sighed, as if trying to exhale the tangled mess in his head. He patted Daba's shoulder, his voice calm but tired. You did great. I'm going back to sleep. He walked away without looking back, but in his heart, he told himself, this world is too chaotic. The thing I saw today probably wasn't just a palace. And the most terrifying part wasn't the similarity, but the feeling that an invisible hand was using coincidence to rewrite his logic. Daba watched Chen Mang's retreating back, scratching the back of his head in utter confusion. Where did we go wrong? Right then, Fuliyu walked over, looking dissatisfied. Why did you bring the blueprint out? I told you not to show it to the captain beforehand. If you show it to him early like this, when I finish building it, the captain will lose the feeling of surprise. He snorted, acting like a sociology expert. You call that putting the climax first. That's a major taboo in social interaction. Daba whispered awkwardly. I saw the captain was happy at the time, so I wanted to make him even happier. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. I don't know why the captain suddenly changed his mood either. Fuliyu crossed his arms, tilting his head in thought. What do you think caused it? Daba hesitated. I'm not sure, but it definitely has to do with the blueprint. The captain's expression changed after seeing it. Maybe it's because of the 4 round pillars in the front. I've been studying human civilization these past few days. Humans really hate the number 4. They think it's unlucky. Fuliyu immediately asked, then 5 pillars? Daba answered quickly, as if he just had a brilliant idea. I think 9 pillars would be better. It implies the supreme authority of an emperor. Fuliyu nodded. Makes sense. Chen Mang returned to his cabin and sat down in his chair. The screen on the left displayed Daba's palace blueprint. The screen on the right showed the image of the heavenly palace he had seen in space today. He looked back and forth, and the more he looked, the more he felt something pressing down on his chest, heavy and cold. If the patterns really were the ancient goblin language, then who carved them onto the heavenly palace? Or worse, the heavenly palace was the original, and all of Daba's ideas were just a reflected path. He didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't deny it either. After a very long silence, Xiao Ai's voice rang out in the ship, clear and cautious. Captain, based on that blueprint, I deduced the general shape when completed. This blueprint is too idealized. Many technological barriers haven't been given clear breakthrough plans. But if we only look at the exterior, it has a 71% similarity to the heavenly palace we saw today. The rest is mostly differences in some details. For example, those massive round pillars in front of the main entrance. On the blueprint, there are 4 pillars, but the actual heavenly palace has 9. Xiao Ai continued, its voice steady but increasingly unsettling. The remaining differences are just minor details. Overall, this palace was built almost exactly according to that blueprint. In the design plan, Daba and the others coated the palace's surface with a special paint for deep space. This paint can reflect a massive amount of starlight, making the palace look both incomparably colossal and as if its glory is shining across the universe. Xiao Ai paused for a beat, then added as if reading a report, furthermore, it can absorb and store energy. Even in sectors with no nearby stars, it can still shine brilliantly. At the core, 9 specialized spaces are installed. Each port anchors a star as a daily energy supply. Based on data deduction, these 2 things should have originated from the same person. Chen Mang sighed again, rubbing his temples without saying a word. At this point, it was almost certain. The heavenly palace he saw today, barring any surprises, was very likely his own. It was the one Daba built for him. It was just that it belonged to a very distant time. It should have been a product of the future. Yet for some unknown reason, it had appeared in the present space-time. That thought made his spine run cold. It was like standing in front of a painting that already had its ending drawn, while he hadn't even picked up the brush yet. Chen Mang's eyes suddenly narrowed, looking at the telescope on the control panel. The level 10 telescope he had once crafted. He had thrown it into a space-time rift. The only way to send an object back to the past was to throw it into a space-time rift. In other words, on some day in the future, the heavenly palace that Daba imagined and actually successfully built was thrown into a space-time rift by him. Just thinking about it was ridiculously absurd. How massive would a space-time rift have to be to swallow an entire palace? And an even harder pill to swallow. Why would he throw a perfectly good palace into it? Throwing a level 10 telescope could be understood as probing, but did he really need to use a palace to scout the way? Worse still, that palace had now suddenly disappeared. God knows where it drifted off to in that damn flow of time. But then Chun Mang suddenly laughed, as if trying to pull himself out of the suffocating feeling. I guess that counts as good news. To build a palace of that level, the human civilization at that time would have to be at least level 5 or level 6, right? In other words, at least until the human civilization develops to level 5 or 6, I won't die. This logic is correct, right? He paused for another beat, like grabbing onto a thin rope in a flood. Consider it suddenly knowing a part of the future. No, Xiao AI's voice rang out in the cabin, intentionally gloomy. I think the captain should be a bit more pessimistic. It spoke as if placing stones on a scale one by one. First of all, under normal circumstances, the captain definitely wouldn't throw this palace into a space-time rift, and it's also very hard to find a space-time rift that massive, right? So let's assume an abnormal situation. Xiao AI began to list them out, so clearly it was chilling. Abnormal possibility number 1. The human civilization encounters an extremely powerful enemy. Space-time collapses, countless massive space-time rifts engulf the territory, and the civilization is destroyed. Countless items and ruins fall into the rifts. This palace falls in two. It paused for exactly one beat, then continued without any emotion. Abnormal possibility number 2. The human civilization is highly prosperous. But the captain dies early due to an unknown accident. The goblin civilization, in their grief, fulfills their promise, builds the palace belonging to the captain, and then throws it into a space-time rift as a burial object or a tribute. Then it casually added, as if deliberately trying to break the ice, abnormal possibility number 3. Humanity is prosperous. The captain gets a girlfriend. Then the relationship goes sour. You break up and start dividing assets. In a fit of rage, the captain throws the real estate straight into a space-time rift, leaving behind a vicious remark. If I can't have it, no one can. Chun Mang glared at Xiao AI, looking like he had just been force-fed a mouthful of rocks. The first two possibilities were somewhat plausible, but wasn't the last one a bit too absurd? Are you messing with me? Xiao AI replied very seriously, as if properly performing its regulatory function, seeing that the captain was unhappy. I told a joke. I hope it cheered the captain up a bit. Chun Mang shook his head, not wanting to drag it out, but his mind was even more tangled. He frowned, his voice dropping, as if dissecting his own thoughts. Right now, I'm only focusing on one question. The reason I threw the level 10 telescope into the space-time rift back then was simply because I had absolutely no idea this would happen. I just tossed it in because it was convenient. He paused, then spoke slower, each word dropping heavily. But what if I had suddenly changed my mind back then? What if I didn't throw the telescope, but threw something else instead? Chun Mang stared into the empty space in front of him, feeling like he was touching an invisible wall. For example, now I know that on some day in the future, I might, for whatever reason, throw the heavenly palace built by Daba into a space-time rift. Since I already know this, what if, when that day comes, I choose not to throw it? A cruel thought flashed through his mind, one that even he found horrifying. Or I just ruthlessly destroy it the moment Daba finishes building it. Or even, I go completely ruthless right now and directly wipe out the goblin race. He said it out loud, like an extreme test. Not because he wanted to do it, but because he was afraid. If fate was a loop, was his choice still a choice? Then what would happen? When that time comes, if no heavenly palace is thrown into a space-time rift, would the heavenly palace that already appeared in space still exist? As soon as the words fell, the cabin sank into silence. Even Xiao AI, an AI with level 200 computing power, seemed to crash. A long time later, it spoke in a hoarse voice, sounding like a sigh. Captain, I think it's time I got upgraded to level 500. Level 200 feels a bit insufficient. Chun Mang curled his lip, saying no more. He knew perfectly well that this was the kind of question that was practically impossible to answer in current reality. It was like holding an egg in his hand, being told it was laid by a chicken from the future. So if the chicken in the future decided not to lay it anymore, then what exactly was the egg he was holding right now? But Xiao AI quickly spoke up again. Chen Meng narrowed his eyes slightly, staying silent for a long time. Then he slowly said, as if asking himself, if, when that day comes in the future, I make the exact opposite choice, then the heavenly palace that already appeared in space should disappear, right? He paused for a beat, feeling this thought was both logical and terrifying. That heavenly palace. We just saw it not long ago, and then it disappeared. Tell me, could it be that on some day in the future, I made the opposite choice, so it disappeared? Xiao AI answered immediately, its voice sounding like it was begging for mercy for its processor. Come on, Captain, my brain is starting to refuse to think. Let's switch to a happier, lighter topic. Do you want to look forward to the cosmic level supermodel effects when I get upgraded to level 500? Chen Meng glanced at it, curled his lips, not expecting much. Xiao AI looked visibly deflated. All right. Chen Meng waved his hand, his voice lazy but firm. Relax, I've got a plan. Once this mining run is done, I'll upgrade you. Why are you rushing? That armor over there just doesn't know how to talk, but isn't it in more of a hurry than you? Xiao AI fell silent for a second, then conceded. True, it is more important. Outside, tens of thousands of light years away, within the territory of the Nanmei civilization, a massive event occurred today. An unparalleled, colossal heavenly palace suddenly appeared above a planet. The news spread so fast that, in the blink of an eye, it reached every other planet in the civilization. It immediately caught the government's attention, and countless scientific research teams were dispatched to investigate. At the same time, a minor incident took place. A father and son, who hadn't spoken in a long time due to various conflicts, called each other for the first time today. The distance between them seemed to have eased a bit. A chubby young man, currently on a mining planet in the southern frontier, looked up at the virtual screen floating in midair. The giant palace taking up almost half the sky left him frozen in shock. His voice trembled. Dad, that thing isn't going to fall, is it? You and Mom better run first. It looks way too dangerous. He swallowed hard, then couldn't help but grumble. Mom kept saying the southern frontier is underdeveloped and chaotic. Why do I feel like the northern frontier where you guys are isn't any safer? What the hell is this? Did God manifest? Or is Satan rushing his year-end KPIs? The middle-aged man on the screen shook his head, trying to sound calm. I'm fine. I have my ways. Even if it really falls, I can survive. You, on the other hand, hurry up and come back. Stop being mad at me. If you like mining so much, I'll build a mine right behind our house for you to dig. The chubby young man immediately protested, as if clinging to the one thing that proved him right. I like the feeling of mining with my own hands on a mining planet. I like the feeling of harvesting the fruits of my own labor. The middle-aged man frowned, then softened his tone as if coaxing him. Then I'll buy you a high-grade mining planet. You can take your time digging. The chubby guy was stunned. Are you that rich? It's all just pocket change. He shook his head, not bothering to care. He was too used to his dad's three main hobbies: drinking, fishing, and bragging. He said firmly, I still want to make my own money. Spending money I earn myself gives me peace of mind. The middle-aged man frowned again, his tone growing harsh. But you've always been a loner, and over there, you have no one to talk to. If this keeps up, what are you going to do about your future? The chubby guy's lips moved. He was about to say he had made a mysterious friend, but on second thought, he swallowed the words. He just retorted in frustration, didn't you say you were super rich? If you're so rich, even if I'm a loner, I can just leech off you for the rest of my life. What are you worried about? The middle-aged man pressed on, shifting to the worry he truly cared about. But you still need to find a woman, right? The chubby guy replied bluntly. If you're rich, there's no shortage of ways. But I'm not looking for one. The middle-aged man glanced around, and seeing his wife wasn't nearby, his anger flared up. His words came out harsh and heavy. All you do all day is watch those movies, handle it yourself, and call it a day. At the very least, you should go find a few celebrities to mess around with. You're this old and still a virgin. Will I even get to hold a grandchild in this lifetime? He growled, issuing an ultimatum. Let me tell you straight. If you don't bring me a grandchild within 10 years, don't even think about spending a single cent of my money." His deepest secret exposed right to his face, the chubby guy instantly exploded. He yelled, his ears burning hot, "I won't spend a single cent of your money for the rest of my life. If you want a grandchild so badly, go have one yourself. I'm never coming back. From now on, I don't have a dad like you, and you can pretend you don't have a son like me." Then he decisively hung up. The relationship that had just shown signs of softening instantly shattered, becoming even colder than before. After hanging up, the chubby guy slumped into his chair, panting with anger. Only one stubborn thought remained in his head. He had to make his own money. Only spending money he earned himself would feel empowering. Once this mine was fully excavated, he would contract another one. Then he'd pay back the money he borrowed from his mom for this trip. From now on, every penny he spent would be earned by his own two hands. A long time later, he finally glanced at the mine's surveillance video. His new friend still hadn't shown up. This mine was almost tapped out. Once it was, he'd have to leave. He wondered if he'd ever see that friend again. But today, he had a new topic to talk about. A heavenly palace had suddenly appeared in his civilization. He was sure his new friend would definitely be interested. A day later, the Nanmei civilization's research team had preliminarily boarded the heavenly palace, but no one dared to go deep inside. They had only reached the main gate. This palace was simply too massive, and knowing almost nothing about it, no one wanted to take the risk. Lured by the temptation of massive profits, civilian exploration teams began to be sent inside one by one. Meanwhile, down on the planet, numerous temporary research institutes were set up, conducting comprehensive surveys of the palace's exterior. They were trying to peel back every secret from this thing that had fallen from the sky, like a prophecy. The progress was incredibly fast. With the central government's attention, both the official and civilian systems of the Nanmei civilization were mobilized simultaneously. The explosive power they unleashed was almost suffocating. Soon, a rough voice echoed across the research institute's landing pad. "Out of the way. Move it." A cold, imposing warship suddenly hovered in the air, then slowly descended to the ground. The hatch opened, and a massive number of armed personnel flooded out like a tide. In the center of that escort, a white-haired old man of extremely advanced age, supported by two beautiful young women, slowly stepped out. At the entrance of the research institute, a crowd of researchers in white lab coats had been waiting for a long time. The old man coughed violently as he walked. Before he could even step inside, a researcher handed him several photos. He coughed a few more times, then calmly stuffed his blood-stained handkerchief back into his pocket, as if it were an everyday occurrence. But the moment his eyes fell on the patterns in the photos, his expression went blank. He muttered, as if pulled back to some distant memory, "This is it. This is exactly it." He took a deep breath, his voice hoarse but decisive. "This is the Geostar civilization. It's a patterned form of the ancient Geostar language, with an extremely long history. The Geostar civilization is also an ancient one. Its historical origins can even be traced back to the era when human civilization still existed." He paused, his eyes glued to the photos. This type of pattern usually only appears in the tombs of the Geostar nobility and royalty. He read the meaning directly, every word dropping like iron. "This sentence means, all races who come here must kneel and submit." Then he moved to the next photo, where this palace stands as the center of the universe. As soon as he finished, the expressions of the surrounding researchers changed drastically. Even the armed escorts instinctively raised their hands, completely forgetting about their perimeter defense. At this moment, their attention was pulled tightly to the old man's words rather than any other potential danger. The head of the research institute lowered his voice, asking sternly to force himself to stay awake. "Elder Wei, are you absolutely sure?" He knew Elder Wei had studied the Geostar civilization for years, and was even the foremost expert on it within the Nanmei civilization. But he still couldn't help but confirm it one more time. The words he just heard were so shocking that even a single mistranslated character could lead to vastly different consequences. Elder Wei understood the weight of this questioning and didn't get angry. He stared at the photos for a long time before slowly nodding, like sealing a life or death verdict. "Yes, that is what it means." He continued, his voice growing hoarser. No one knows how many god-tier civilizations exist in the universe, but this palace is very likely the culmination of the Geostar civilization's ultimate efforts, belonging to some god-tier civilization. He emphasized, as if warning everyone present, an ordinary civilization wouldn't dare carve such words onto their palace. In the universe, boasting doesn't come without karma. If you can't bear the weight of it, you'll suffer the backlash. Daring to carve these words means they were confident enough to disregard any backlash. And that confidence, in Elder Way's deduction, could only come from the absolute peak. But even god-tier civilizations rarely dare to say all races must kneel and submit. That statement is too massive. So massive that just hearing it feels like summoning a catastrophe. The head of the institute fell silent, then pulled out a few more photos, handing them over with a grim expression. There are a few more here. Please take a look, Elder Way. Elder Way took them and carefully cross-referenced them for a long time. He even pulled out an ancient text, flipping back and forth to verify, before finally speaking. Every sentence sounded like he was reading an epitaph. This one means, those who revere may exist. Those who question shall be destroyed. He moved to another photo. Time submits here. Space coils here. Then the next. Karma is written here. Destiny is decided here. Finally, he stared at the last photo the longest, as if it were staring back at him. Past and future all converge upon this moment. All things ultimately return to silence. Only this palace remains eternal. No one said a word. Massive waves of shock surged in everyone's hearts. The most ignorant were the armed escorts. At first, they were just eavesdropping for gossip, but when the crushing sense of apocalyptic dread hit them, their curiosity vanished completely. Some even had a fleeting thought. Would they be silenced just for hearing things they shouldn't have? Elder Way broke the silence, his voice hoarse and trembling. It's highly likely a god-tier civilization. If this palace was intentionally sent to us by that god-tier civilization, then perhaps we should start writing our wills now. Time is running out. He looked straight at the head of the institute. Have you detected any spatial fluctuations yet? No. The head of the institute shook his head, his face as heavy as lead. 3 hours ago, the Nanmei civilization's highest-grade spatial detectors were brought in. We haven't detected any spatial fluctuations whatsoever. He swallowed hard, then emphasized every word. Not unclear fluctuations. I mean, absolutely zero fluctuations. Elder Way frowned, as if struck by a glaring inconsistency. How can there be no fluctuations? Any method involving spatial teleportation or wormhole traversal will create fluctuations. The larger the mass, the harder it is to hide. How could a palace this massive suddenly appear in the planet's sky without causing a single ripple? He spoke slowly, then offered a comparison that sent chills down everyone's spines. This is the equivalent of dropping a rock thousands of kilometers in diameter into the ocean. And the surface of the water doesn't even show a single ripple. It's illogical. The head of the institute could only repeat himself, as if he too wanted to deny it. But that is the reality. Elder Way stayed silent for a long time before exhaling, his voice dropping as if accepting something even more terrifying than the illogical. If it's a god-tier civilization, then everything makes sense. He raised his eyes, asking his next question as if desperately clinging to the last shred of concrete fact. Inside, have you found any civilization imprints? No civilization imprints whatsoever. Radar also shows no life forms inside. Not a single soul. The head of the institute reported, his voice as dry as if he had just swallowed sand. Theoretically, no civilization imprints means the civilization that owned this palace has gone extinct. But right now, we can't confirm if we're completely unable to detect any information due to dimensional suppression. Hearing this, Elder Way only sighed and said no more. A long time later, he finally let out a gloomy sentence, as if comforting himself before a pre-written ending. Good thing I've lived long enough. I guess I've broken even. It's fine. I've studied the Geostar civilization my whole life without ever seeing them with my own eyes. If, in the final moments of my life, I get to witness the Geostar civilization, a civilization that very likely reached the god tier, then my life is complete. It's just a bit of a pity for you young folks. News of the Heavenly Palace began spreading through the Nanmei civilization like a virus, almost impossible to stop. More and more people found out. Copies of images and rumors multiplied across every channel. But then, in a single moment, all news was wiped clean from every corner of the network. The ID accounts of anyone who had touched the information were locked by the AI mainbrain. A mandatory gag order was enforced, with penalties hanging at a level 1 alert. For an advanced civilization, power didn't just lie in firepower. They had other muscles, developed across multiple dimensions, like controlling public opinion, freezing data, and suffocating a narrative before it could become a belief. The areas where the news had spread the most were immediately placed under total martial law. As for the planet where the Heavenly Palace was located, it entered a global level 1 alert. All external communications were cut, all wormhole entrances were sealed, and contact with the outside world was completely blocked. This was a level 1 combat martial law, usually only enacted when a civilization faced a crisis capable of upending its very foundations. In the history of the Nanmei civilization, this level had only occurred twice. The first time was when they upgraded from a level 4 to a level 5 civilization. The second was when the current leader launched a revolution that shook the upper echelons. And the third time was right now. The man in charge of the Fengshe auction house, an elderly-looking man, stood by the window, sensing the changes outside. He remained silent for a long time, his expression complex, as if weighing something only he could see. He had his own information channels. When a person held massive wealth, even if they didn't want to do anything, countless people would actively seek them out, offering all kinds of services, including information. Whatever he wanted to know, he could find out instantly. The price was just a fraction of his wealth, so insignificant it wasn't even worth mentioning. And the one thing he didn't lack was money. He already knew the meaning of the patterns on the 9 massive pillars of the Heavenly Palace. He also knew that even the Nanmei civilization's most advanced spatial fluctuation detectors hadn't picked up a single ripple. This object hadn't been transported via a wormhole, hadn't popped out of a higher dimensional pseudospace, and hadn't teleported here. It had simply appeared in the planet's sky, completely normally. So normally it was absurd. So normally it sent chills down people's spines. The Nanmei civilization was a level 5 civilization. Even on a cosmic scale, they were considered quite powerful. But they had absolutely no means of moving such a colossal object into an area without creating spatial fluctuations. He felt more at ease than most people, because he knew more than they did. This Heavenly Palace wasn't a god-tier civilization setting its sights on the Nanmei civilization, nor was it thrown at them by some other civilization. It was just a cosmic bonus item, drawn in by his desk. Theoretically, that palace belonged to him. The thought didn't make him happy. It only made his chest feel heavier, as if he had just heard a death sentence whispered to him. Right at that moment, the desk lamp on his desk flickered slightly. The old man immediately understood. He turned, walked quickly to the desk, and pulled open the drawer. Sure enough, a new cosmic contraband item had appeared inside, just like this time. But unlike the previous times, his expression gradually turned ugly. A feeling welled up inside him that he was being dragged into an invisible conspiracy, sinking deeper the more he struggled. This mysterious, nameless desk had brought him unimaginable wealth. It had catapulted him from an ordinary factory worker to one of the top hidden tycoons of the Nanmei civilization. No one knew exactly how much wealth he possessed. All of it was thanks to this desk. And a long time ago, he had understood one thing. Every gift from fate already had a price tag attached. Nothing in this world was free. Sooner or later, this desk would demand something from him, and he wouldn't be able to refuse. He just didn't expect that day to come so fast. So fast that he hadn't even prepared himself for the feeling of his name being called. Inside the drawer lay an incredibly ancient bronze key, only the size of a palm, resting deep within the drawer that was dozens of centimeters deep. The drawer of this desk was significantly larger than a normal one, reaching almost to the floor. The space under the desk wasn't empty at all. Just looking at the design was enough to tell. This was not a desk meant for an ordinary person. He didn't know what this bronze key was for, but he wasn't an idiot either. The nameless Heavenly Palace had just appeared, and right after, this bronze key showed up. Anyone would instantly connect the two. The old man's expression shifted constantly. He had long anticipated the day he'd have to pay the price. Whatever the drawer demanded of him in the future, he was ready to accept it, as long as his wife and children could live well. Then it would all be worth it. But looking at that key lying there silently, he still couldn't stop a freezing thought from running down his spine. Some prices weren't just about accepting them and moving on. Some prices, the moment you saw them, you knew there was no turning back. But now that things had truly reached this point, he began to feel unwilling. He had fought so hard to climb to where he was today. If he was just going to be swept up into some nameless conspiracy, he couldn't stand the feeling of being dragged away without even putting up a fight. It wasn't out of greed, but because he had sacrificed too much for today. He didn't want his today to be casually taken away by someone like a mere object. The old man stood still for a long time, his face grim, before finally swallowing a bitter decision. He walked over to the bookshelf in the corner of his office, pulled out a book, flipped to page 37, found a slightly raised character, and pressed it. The next moment, the room trembled slightly, and a pitch-black tunnel entrance slowly revealed itself on the floor. The old man took a deep breath, turned around, and wrapped his arms around the desk. The desk, which was already heavy and bulky, now felt like he was embracing his entire life. Burdensome and painful. He struggled to carry it toward the tunnel entrance. Dozens of meters underground, the lights in the tunnel flickered on section by section. On the ground was a long conveyor belt. The old man placed the desk on it, then stepped on himself. He pressed a button on the side. The conveyor belt immediately whirred to life, carrying both him and the desk deep into the tunnel at high speed. Civilization had exploded, technology sprang up like mushrooms after rain, and component blueprints were constantly being researched. Methods of travel like spatial jumps and wormhole traversal had become so common that people treated them like daily meals. Without those means, expanding into the vast universe was practically a pipe dream. Just traveling more than a light year away from a planet was enough to drive someone to despair. But the more advanced the technology, the more traces it left. The faster it was, the more obvious the spatial fluctuations it created. To keep this a secret, he chose the most primitive method. Sometimes, the most primitive way was the one with the fewest loopholes. This was a secret passage he had built a long time ago, meant for secretly moving the desk in times of crisis. That desk was his lifeblood, the root of his empire. He couldn't live without it. This secret passage had cost him an immense amount of money and effort, and everyone who had participated in its construction had been assigned by him to exploration teams, sent to the southern frontier on missions, and permanently lost contact in an accident. He told himself it was necessary, because this secret couldn't be leaked. But whenever he thought about it, a cold streak still slid across his chest, like a debt he could never fully repay. The tunnel was also lined with countless shielding components. Unless it was the highest grade radar, no one would ever detect this place, let alone know it existed. An hour later, the conveyor belt slowly came to a halt at a spacious underground platform. This wasn't the end of the line, but it was much wider than the initial tunnel. There was quite a bit of equipment around, looking like an excavated rest stop. Standing on the conveyor belt, the old man took another deep breath. He hugged the desk one last time, then placed it onto a hydraulic press in the corner of the room. His movements were heavy, as if he were placing his own heart on a blade. Once done, he let out a soft exhale, pulled a cigarette from his pocket, and lit it. Under the glaring lights of the tunnel, the cigarette in his mouth glowed and faded like a dying candle. The smoke he exhaled lingered at first, then was torn to shreds by the cold draft in the tunnel. He took a deep drag, as if trying to suck all the foul air of the mortal world into his lungs. When he exhaled, the smoke curled around his wrinkles. It made him look a little older, but also as if a weight had been lifted. An unknown amount of time passed. The cigarette ash quietly fell onto his coat. He looked down at it, but didn't brush it off. He just stood there, watching the smoke in front of him slowly dissipate. His eyes were a little red, whether from the sting of the smoke or something else. It was hard to tell. When the cigarette burned out, he pinched the butt out with his fingers. He walked up to the desk, took the bronze key out of his coat, tossed it back into the drawer, and closed it for the last time. The motion felt like nailing a coffin shut, locking away a chapter of his life he was never allowed to look back on. He picked up the remote control next to the hydraulic press and took a few steps back. Staring at the desk resting quietly under the press, he zoned out for a long time. Then he looked down at the red button in his hand and muttered, as if speaking to something that had truly lived alongside him, "Goodbye, old friend." In life, there always comes a time when we must part ways. Only when standing on the boundary of life and death does a person realize they aren't as strong as they thought. He used to think he wasn't afraid of death, but when the desk started showing signs of making demands, he felt fear. He didn't want to be dragged into a nameless conspiracy, much less become a pawn. He figured it was time for fate's gift to come to an end. He didn't need it anymore. His current empire was solid enough. Even without this desk, it wouldn't be affected too much. At least, he forced himself to believe that. The next moment, the old man resolutely pressed the red button. The roar of the hydraulic press echoed deafeningly through the tunnel. That ordinary-looking desk, under the terrifying crushing force, almost shattered instantly. The tabletop broke first, sending countless wooden splinters flying into the air. On that desk, he had written down countless dreams. He had thought many times about passing it down to his son. Yet now, he was destroying it with his own hands, letting it be crushed under the cold, unfeeling press. Men are often very sentimental about things that have accompanied them for a long time. Watching the desk slowly shatter, the old man's eyes grew red, like a piece of his memory was being torn to shreds right in front of him. But right at that moment, the hydraulic press suddenly jammed. The old man froze. The roaring sound didn't stop, vibrating in his ears. He pressed the red button a few more times, but the press couldn't move an inch further. The desk before him was half destroyed, with countless wooden splinters still suspended in the air. It was as if an invisible force was holding them in place, refusing to let them fall, refusing to let it end. The old man hurriedly controlled the hydraulic press to return to its original position. The moment the pressure lifted, the desk immediately collapsed to one side. And right then, he finally saw the true form of the object before him. The desk was just a shell. When the outer layer of wood was crushed, what was revealed inside was a refrigerator. A flash of terror crossed his eyes, and his heart skipped half a beat. Why is it a refrigerator? He quickly stepped forward, brushed off all the sawdust and debris stuck to it, and bent down to inspect every corner. From a human perspective, this thing could only be a refrigerator, and a doorless one at that. This was clearly a modified refrigerator. Just now, he thought he was pulling open a drawer, but in reality, he was just pulling a doorless refrigerator out from under the desk. Refusing to believe it, he tried a few more times. The results only made him more frustrated. This refrigerator was bizarrely tough. The hydraulic press's pillar was already dented from the force, yet the surface of the fridge remained completely unscathed. The old man stood still for a long time, as if weighing whether he should keep messing with this bizarre thing. Finally, he shoved the refrigerator aside, deciding to ignore it. He turned back to the conveyor belt, following the tunnel back out. He'd just leave it here for now. As for that key, he casually tossed it inside the refrigerator, like putting it away so it wouldn't be an eyesore. When he returned to his office, as if possessed by some ghost, he suddenly called his informant, asking if any locked doors had been found during the exploration of the Heavenly Palace. The information came back very clear. They had only skimmed the outer edges and hadn't yet ventured deep into the Heavenly Palace. In the end, that civilization still chose to explore it. They had tried their best to lock down the news, but they also understood one thing. If a god-tier civilization found out, the other party would assume they had already explored it anyway. Since that was the case, they might as well take the first step. They might even find some fortuitous encounter left behind by the god-tier civilization, enough to help them leap to a level 6 civilization. At level 5, trying to upgrade step by step was almost despairingly difficult. Many times, a civilization just had to wait for exactly this kind of opportunity. Once they encountered a massive fortuitous event and fully digested it, they would enter a period of explosive civilizational growth. Saying step-by-step progression was impossible wasn't entirely true. Theoretically, with infinite resources and infinite time, any civilization could climb straight to level 9. But the problem was that resources weren't infinite. Time wasn't infinite. and other civilizations certainly wouldn't sit idly by and watch someone else grow. Inside the Hongxing, Teacher Chiu stood at the podium, looking down at the students below with a smile as he lectured. In the deep universe, there are many, many civilizations. The known forms of civilization currently include trained civilizations, cultivation civilizations, and racial civilizations. He paused, intentionally asking a question to control the pacing. Each form has its own pros and cons, but what about their essence? The whole class answered in unison. It's all about harvesting core energy. Only the method of harvesting differs. Exactly, Teacher Chiu nodded. Trained civilizations are the dominant form in the current universe, and our human civilization is also walking this path. What's the advantage? As long as there are enough resources, the speed of development is incredibly fast. It changes almost day by day. He looked at the class, his voice dropping slightly. All of you have lived through the apocalypse. Maybe you feel like that was a long time ago, but in reality, it's only been a few years. And in those few years, human civilization has developed at an unbelievable pace. Outside the classroom, Chen Meng stood by the window, accompanied by Uncle Li and Lao Zhu, quietly observing the scene inside. He suddenly realized this feeling was strangely familiar. It wasn't just a classroom, it was a cross-section of the entire civilization. Their power had increased, but education hadn't been left behind. Chen Meng tilted his head to look at Lao Zhu, feeling a bit amused. Does Teacher Chiu always like to drag out his words like that when he talks? Lao Zhu scratched his nose and replied awkwardly. Chen Meng didn't comment further. He no longer wanted to pay too much attention to the heavenly palace. That belonged to a very distant future. Right now, the only two things in front of him were developing the civilization and dealing with the racial civilization. The racial civilization still showed no signs of launching a full-scale attack. Chen Meng wasn't in a rush either. He knew this wasn't the best time to start a war. His mines weren't fully excavated yet, and fighting early would just burn his own resources. Since he had some free time today, he decided to check on the operations of various departments. Now, all the cities of human civilization had academies, and the academy on the Hongxing was the highest tier. It had the strongest faculty and the highest status. The students studying here had all gone through rigorous selection, filtering for intellect, temperament, and background. Anyone sitting in this classroom was practically guaranteed to enter the management ranks of human civilization in the future. Watching the teaching scene before him, Chen Meng felt a mix of reassurance and vigilance. When the ship was still small, his control was almost absolute. He knew about almost everything that happened in every corner. But as the scale ballooned and the population grew, he couldn't grasp everything anymore. His subordinates couldn't report every little thing either. Many matters didn't even reach the level where they needed his attention. He understood this clearly, but precisely because of that, he needed to come down and see things with his own eyes. Only then could he feel the true changes in the ship and the civilization, instead of just staring at cold strings of data jumping on a screen. The data Xiao AI provided was accurate, of course, but it lacked a human touch. Very good. Chen Meng nodded slightly outside the classroom window. He didn't step inside to interrupt the class. He just took a quick tour with the principal before leaving the school. What was worth mentioning was that the principal of the Hongxing Academy, representing the highest academy of human civilization, was an old acquaintance. Boss Meng, do you have any other instructions? Uncle Li stood beside him, bowing respectfully. Chen Meng tilted his head to look at Uncle Li, a strange glint in his eyes. He had almost forgotten this guy was still on the ship. He used to do resident statistics, served as the head of the plantation carriage, and even doubled as the accountant for Sunshine City. He had even researched the zombie monster spawner. He was a true veteran of the ship. He had been following closely since the early days of the Hongxing, with a resident ID number in the 3 digits. By all accounts, he was absolutely a founding contributor. But the ship developed too fast. Many old friends gradually lost their footing and faded into the crowd. Chen Meng always maintained a cold, objective perspective. Those with ability got promoted. That was the natural law. Interfering out of sentimentality wouldn't necessarily yield good results. He originally thought Uncle Li would end up the same way, slowly retreating to the second line, opening a small business on the Cerulean planet, and living a peaceful life. That wouldn't have been bad. But unexpectedly, Uncle Lee had quietly secured the position of principal at the Hongxing Academy before this whole incident. This status was by no means low. Chen Meng turned and asked, "Who handled the personnel appointment for this?" Lao Zhu, standing nearby, immediately spoke up, as if afraid a second's delay would cause a misunderstanding. "I handled the appointment. When we were choosing the principal, we had a few candidates. Teacher Chiu, who still teaches on the ship, a professor we met on the Cerulean planet, a few others, and Uncle Lee." Lao Zhu spoke fluidly, observing Chen Meng's reaction as he went. Ultimately, after evaluating their abilities, testing their character, and factoring in seniority and multidimensional experience, Uncle Lee won. "I figured the Hongxing Academy is the top academy of human civilization. The students graduating from here will all step into management roles. Loyalty to you and to the Hongxing is the most important thing. Uncle Lee has deep seniority and is extremely loyal. I reported this in the weekly email report." "Oh, really?" Chen Meng was a bit surprised. Xiao AI, standing beside him, said softly, "It was submitted on time. I can confirm this." She remembered it very clearly. At the time, Chen Meng had just woken up, sitting in his chair smoking a cigarette. He skimmed through a few lines and skipped the rest. Looking back now, it seemed he hadn't even read the names carefully back then. Chen Meng laughed and patted Uncle Lee on the shoulder. "Good job. I've always valued you. I'm glad we found a position on the ship that suits you." He paused for a beat, as if reminding himself not to let his habit of only looking at results blind him to the old-timers. "Keep up the good work. How's the progress on your zombie monster spawner?" Uncle Lee answered immediately, without beating around the bush. "I've already handed over the research results to Chikashio. I heard they've made significant progress over there." Chen Meng nodded, then remembered someone else. "What about Shinjia? He's at the Hongxing Academy, serving as a cadaver teacher." "Very good." Chen Meng looked around and didn't linger any longer. He, along with Lao Zhu and Biaozi, continued their inspection of other areas of the ship. Taking a stroll down here every now and then was nice. His mood felt much lighter. This was all his empire, the foundation he had built bit by bit over the past few years. Seeing these familiar faces made him feel at ease. It was a feeling that reminded him he wasn't just captaining a ship, but maintaining a home for a lot of people. Chen Meng walked further away. Uncle Lee breathed a sigh of relief, his back straightening up. He coughed lightly and said in a hoarse voice to the person standing next to him, "Director Xia, you handled Chen Meng's surprise inspection well. Remember the key points. Next time, tell Teacher Chiu not to drag out his words so much when he talks. It looks a bit overacted." "Understood." The young man standing next to him puffed out his chest and raised his head to reply, his face serious. He looked a bit stiff, not quite able to carry the demeanor of a director yet, but he was trying his best to stick to the script. This young man, called Director Xia, was the very person who had followed Uncle Lee for years. He had been a steadfast supporter, always cheering him on. Even when Uncle Lee was at his lowest, he never spared words of encouragement. Finally, he had waited until the day his boss made it big. A true case of riding the coattails all the way to the top. Honestly speaking, the guy had no outstanding abilities, no real talent, and no special fortuitous encounters. In the apocalypse, he was just a grunt, the kind of guy on the side of the road who could easily get crushed. But he had reached his current position relying entirely on one thing: single-minded dedication and never giving up. His life was proof of the saying, "If you persevere, you'll eventually see the moonlight." If the moon isn't shining yet, it just means you haven't waited long enough. So keep waiting. He put on a stern face and strode toward the teaching building. However, perhaps because his clothes were a bit too loose, a book fell out of his jacket. Uncle Lee, expressionless, picked up the book titled Dark Management Studies, dusted it off, shoved it back into the guy's chest, and sighed. "I think you have a stereotypical view of what a director should look like. Not every director has to be a guy with a beer belly. You've gained a bit too much weight lately. If you're going to gain weight, at least change out of these obviously baggy clothes. Go on, get out of here. Looking at you gives me a headache." Uncle Lee was about to turn away when he remembered something. "Wait, one more thing. The West District invited the cadaver teacher over today. Take Xinjia there." After saying that, Uncle Lee looked up at the statue of Chen Meng in the Hongxing Academy and nodded in satisfaction. Just now, He noticed Chen Mang had glanced at the statue a few times. Perhaps Chen Mang was quite pleased with this little detail. All students, pay attention. On a pristine white operating table at the Hongxing Academy, a teacher in a white lab coat held a scalpel, his face stern. All cadaver teachers have made immense contributions to medicine. We must maintain an attitude of respect. The teacher paused, then continued, intentionally slowing his pace so the class could keep up. Now, I will dissect a section of the nervous system so you can see with your own eyes what it looks like. Shen Jia lay on the operating table, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling like a man who had lost his soul. There was absolutely no expression on his face. Even when the cold scalpel pierced deep into his body, he didn't react at all, as if the thing being dissected was just an empty shell. Lately, Shen Jia kept repeating the same question in his head. It had gotten to the point where it was a constant, buzzing noise. Why did I choose to eject back then, instead of self-destructing? What is the meaning of life, anyway? If it was going to end, it should have ended cleanly. Why let myself drift in this half-dead state? Teacher, he doesn't seem to be in pain. A student watched the scene, his voice a mix of curiosity and creeped-out dread. The teacher didn't look up, keeping his hands steady. Cadaver teachers are always fearless in the face of life and death. They are not ordinary people. At the same time, in one of the Hongxing's carriages, a movie set was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Under the direction of Zhang Yiren, a massive blockbuster film was underway. It was recreating the entire process of the Hongxing's development during the apocalypse, from beginning to end. Many characters and scenes were being restored as authentically as possible. For this goal, Zhang Yiren had specifically asked Lao Zhu for support, from ship commands to a portion of resources, just to achieve nearly 100% realism. Currently, most of the roles were cast. Lao Zhu and Biaozi were playing themselves. As for the characters who had died, like Lord Cohen, they found the most suitable people in human civilization based on descriptions, used makeup, and had them act. But right now, there was one candidate that was incredibly hard to find. So hard that the entire set was frowning. Who was going to play Chen Mang? This was a huge problem. Ask Chen Mang to come act himself? What a joke. Chen Mang was busy with a million things. Where would he find the time to put on a play for people? Find someone to impersonate Chen Mang? That was even worse. If this movie was released, it would turn into a real versus fake Chen Mang farce. What kind of standard would that set? How about a short man sitting nearby lowered his voice to suggest, as if afraid speaking too loudly would be considered insubordinate? I have an idea. What if we shoot it from Chen Mang's first-person perspective? That way, we don't need an actor to show up as Chen Mang. We just need to ask Boss AI for Chen Mang's voice. Zhang Yiren froze. A spark of inspiration flashed in his eyes. He looked up at the short man, his lips trembling slightly as if he had just struck gold. Wait, let me think. It wasn't like first-person movies had never existed in cinematic history, but they were incredibly hard to shoot. It meant the storytelling method was almost entirely locked onto the protagonist. The pacing of the plot had to be crystal clear, and every detail had to carry the emotional weight through visuals, rather than relying on the protagonist showing their face. But if they could pull it off, this was definitely a way out. No more headaches trying to find someone to play Chen Mang. As long as the first-person perspective was solid enough, all their problems would solve themselves. Right at that moment, Chen Mang, along with Lao Zhu and a group of people, walked onto the set. Everyone sitting on the set immediately sprang to their feet, their faces serious as they greeted him in unison. Chen Mang raised a hand and pressed it down in the air, a casual but forceful gesture. Everyone sit down. I just came to see how far along you guys are. For a civilization to develop, it doesn't just need military might. Culture has to keep up too. He swept his gaze around, his tone both inquiring and checking on their general progress. Have there been any standout works in literature or music lately? Or movies and games? Then he looked toward Zhang Yiren, as if he had already seen quite a few. I've watched the movies you've directed recently. They're pretty good. He paused for a beat, shifting the focus. What about literature? Lao Zhu, standing nearby, hurriedly chimed in, afraid Chen Mang might mistakenly think there was nothing noteworthy. Back on the ship, there was a guy who wrote 20,000 words a novel every day. Now he's become a famous literary giant in human civilization. His new work, Serial Murders on 13th Street, is selling like crazy. Very good. Chen Meng laughed heartily and nodded. He felt a familiar warmth in his chest. It seemed the old crew from the ship's early days really was full of talent. They could succeed in any industry. The corner of Lao Zhu's mouth twitched slightly. He thought for a moment but stayed silent, finding it inconvenient to speak bluntly. First of all, Lao Zhu admitted that the new book was indeed good. But in literature, writing well didn't guarantee fame. There were too many other factors involved. It was just that Lao Zhu didn't want to say it out loud in front of Chen Meng. But in his head, a very pragmatic calculation was running. The small print on the cover that read, "Exclusive author of the Hongxing," probably accounted for at least 70% of the credit. Another 20% was probably the forewords written by friends at the beginning of the book, Lao Zhu, Biaozi. Uncle Li and a few others had all written glowing praises, making it sound like a once-in-a-millennium masterpiece. Another 9.9% was the publisher pushing it with everything they had. The Heavenly Palace had arrived. People were practically handing out the books. Did anyone really need to be taught how this worked? And the final, minuscule fraction that was barely worth mentioning was the actual content of the book. All those things combined created the explosive success. To put it harshly, writing a book with connections like that, let alone serial murders. Lao Zhu figured even if he wrote serial diarrhea, it could still blow up. Selling hundreds of millions of copies wouldn't be a pipe dream. The main thing was, that guy wasn't just blowing hot air. When the Hongxing was still on the Cerulean planet, he really was the ship's exclusive author, responsible for writing novels to give the residents some extra entertainment. Just like why Zhang Yiren's movies were so popular, wasn't it because he used to be the Hongxing's exclusive director? Leaving the Hongxing, as long as you had a bit of ability and some tricks up your sleeve, it was very hard to stay poor. Even if you wanted to be poor, the market wouldn't allow it. That was the halo of origin this ship had unintentionally bestowed upon them. Chen Meng understood that, which was why he wanted the culture to develop on the right track. Not just for pride, but to keep the civilization's soul intact, to maintain order, and to give people something to believe in when they looked toward the future. Very good. Chen Meng smiled, nodding in satisfaction. What about music? We have that too. Lao Zhu replied smoothly. You probably forgot about someone. Back on the ship, there was a girl who used to sing otaku music. She had a song called Club Johan's Cup, Hello LEC to us they tie. Yeah, I have some impression of her. She's a singer now, and her latest album is selling really well. Not bad. Lao Zhu said that, but in his mind, the album cover automatically popped up. It was the same old gimmick, exclusive singer of the Hongxing. He didn't want to say it, but he increasingly felt that this Hongxing halo was both convenient and dangerous, like a double-edged sword. There were some things that, if not nipped in the bud, would spread and become a joke. And that joke would be enough to make him lose face to the point where he couldn't even hold his head up. Take the red light district during its wild development phase, for example. Back then, using it to solve physiological needs was normal. He had visited a few times himself, which was also normal. But just a few days ago, he found out that one of the women there had tattooed a line on her body, once visited by Vice Captain Lao Zhu of the Hongxing. And thanks to that title, she became the top courtesan of a brothel. Her price is so exorbitant that people were lining up in droves. Just thinking about it sent chills down his spine. Luckily, he found out early, suppressed the news in time, and forced the woman to go straight. Otherwise, if word got out, who knew what his image would be twisted into? After getting a general overview, Chen Meng finally returned to his captain's quarters. The development pace of human civilization was still terrifyingly fast, comprehensive, and changing day by day. He looked a bit further ahead. Once that batch of mining planets was fully excavated, there would definitely be another massive transformation. But for now, he still had to face the cold reality of the upgrade conditions. Inside the Hongxing's captain's quarters, Chen Meng looked at the requirements for upgrading to a level 3 civilization. Upgrade conditions. Intelligent life forms reach 1 billion. Maximum attack energy range exceeds 20,000. Possess at least 2 planets. Civilization resource reserves exceed 10 quadrillion. Construct more than 10 permanent two-way wormholes. After reading it, he immediately knew where the problem lay. The requirements were still tough, especially the resource category, which was so high it was temporarily almost impossible. He wasn't annoyed, just clear-headed. To jump to level 3, he needed a massive push, or a right place right time kind of fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, grinding it out step by step would take forever. Right at that moment, Xiao AI's voice echoed in the room. Captain, that miner has fallen asleep again, and has appeared in that boy's mind once more. Do you want a live broadcast? Put it on. Chen Meng raised an eyebrow. Last time, the miner's emotions fluctuated too wildly, pulling him out of the dream and preventing him from re-entering, leaving their conversation unfinished. Now that he was back in, Chen Meng wanted to extract more information about that civilization. Even though that civilization was incredibly far away and their paths might never cross in his lifetime, it was still a level 5 civilization. Chen Meng was genuinely curious. What level of technology had a level 5 civilization reached? What high-end methods did they possess? How did their society operate? Even if he couldn't use those things right away, they would help him see the ceiling of his developmental path clearly. This time, the other party took the initiative unexpectedly. As soon as the miner appeared, the chubby young man rushed over, his voice excited, holding a tablet like he was holding a heaven-shaking secret. You're here. Something huge happened in our civilization recently. I guarantee you'll be interested. Have you ever seen how big a palace can get? Well, I'm sure it's definitely not as big as ours. It's the size of an entire planet. It suddenly appeared in our civilization today. And it appeared right in the sky above the planet where my dad is. The weirdest part is, it doesn't block the light at all. It's incredibly magical. Look at this. The chubby guy talked nonstop, recounting the new anomaly that had occurred in his civilization. Sitting in the captain's quarters, Chen Meng looked at the image on the tablet in the boy's hand, and suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. His eyes darkened, a bit dazed, as if an invisible thread had just pulled at him. He had originally put the matter of the heavenly palace aside. It was too far away, and he had a mountain of tasks right in front of him. But why did this thing appear right in front of him again in such an unexpected way? Not long ago, the heavenly palace that was near the Starfire civilization had suddenly vanished. He didn't know what had happened, but he didn't care much either. If it was gone, it was gone. He even guessed that maybe his future self had made a different choice, leading to the heavenly palace's departure. Yet now, it had appeared in the other Nanmei civilization. Chen Meng stayed silent for a long time, then asked in a hoarse voice, Xiao AI, compare this heavenly palace with the one we saw before. What's the similarity percentage? He suspected that maybe there wasn't just one heavenly palace in the universe. There could be many. Xiao AI replied quickly, her voice as steady as always. Based on the images from the tablet, the similarity is 96%. They are almost entirely identical. The only difference is the brightness of the reflections and the shadow areas. If we exclude lighting and shadow factors, the similarity is 100%. According to the data, it can be almost certainly confirmed that these two are the exact same heavenly palace. However, we still cannot rule out the possibility of two identical heavenly palaces existing. Chen Meng frowned. He didn't like the word almost. With things like the heavenly palace, a single misstep was enough to destroy an entire civilization. He spoke slowly, as if questioning himself more than Xiao AI. My choice not to explore the heavenly palace back then. Was it a mistake? He stared at the screen as if looking at a sign that didn't belong to the present. The other Nanmei civilization was clearly unimaginably far away, almost completely unrelated. Yet over the past 2 days, various things had continuously created a connection between him and them. A thought made his spine run cold. Could it be that fate was dragging him toward the other Nanmei civilization? Then an even more uncomfortable thought surfaced. Or maybe his future self was guiding his present self down a predetermined path? At the mine, seeing the mysterious tourists stay silent for too long, the chubby guy started to get suspicious. Very quickly, the miner, as usual, pulled out a piece of paper and handed it over. Has your civilization gone inside to explore that palace yet? Have they found anything inside? The chubby guy shook his head. My dad said they're only in the preliminary exploration phase. They haven't even entered the palace gates yet, so no discoveries. He paused, lowering his voice as if afraid of jinxing it. But from what my dad implied, things seem very pessimistic. He feels this will bring a disaster that our civilization won't be able to withstand. Aren't you pessimistic? Me? I'm doing all right. I don't even know if I should be pessimistic or not. He shrugged, speaking very casually, as if talking about the weather. I just think people die and civilizations go extinct. Even God-tier civilizations can't avoid extinction. How could a level 5 civilization avoid it 100%? He paused for a beat, his voice turning raspy. If doomsday really comes, then I guess it's just fate. I see the mainstream society is very pessimistic. Everyone's worried that one day we'll encounter a powerful enemy and our civilization will be wiped out. The main issue is that people live too long. He chuckled dryly. If everyone was like those in low-level civilizations, only living for 60 or 70 years, they wouldn't need to worry about this stuff. After all, most of them wouldn't even live to see that day. When you live long, you get more things to worry about. He seemed to remember something annoying, his face twisting slightly. My dad even tried to set me up on blind dates. I only have one requirement: original. Turns out, no one could meet it. Are you talking about virgins? No. He shook his head immediately. By original, I mean no mechanical organs in the body and never having undergone life extension modifications in a medical pod. He pointed at his own chest, speaking slowly as if emphasizing every word. Like me. Exactly the way I came out of my mother's womb. Purely original. Doesn't your civilization have this concept? He continued explaining, coining his own terminology to make it easier to understand. Going into a medical pod for modifications once counts as one reboot. Modifying twice is 2 reboots. Never having rebooted means you're original. He looked off into the distance, muttering, listening to other people, I always feel like. Once you go into a medical pod for modifications, all your cells and organs are restored to 100%. But the person who steps out, is it still you? The memories are identical, but who knows? Maybe they just peeled your memories out and stuffed them into a clone. He clenched his fists, as if convincing himself. I'd rather die early than reboot my body. He spoke softly, and the more he spoke, the more he revealed a sense of loneliness and slight morbidity. He had been like this since childhood, thinking about things ordinary people couldn't accept. He had few friends, and over time, he became even more reluctant to socialize. The mysterious tourist in front of him was one of the few people he had actively spoken to over the years. Because the other party clearly didn't follow mainstream thinking either, and wouldn't rush to label him as abnormal. So why aren't you dead yet? He froze, looking at the other party with a bewildered expression. I don't want to die just yet. He could be sure of one thing. This person really didn't think he was abnormal. But why did he suddenly feel like the other party wasn't exactly normal either? I mean, doesn't your civilization research death? Don't you research where people go after they die? Or what happens to them? Researching the world after death? The chubby guy nodded seriously. I think any civilization that hasn't achieved immortality will research death. And once you research death, the ultimate destination is usually religion. He spoke bluntly, without sugarcoating it. So far, there haven't been any results. We still don't know where we go after we die. So what kind of entertainment activities does your civilization have? There's a ton. The chubby guy replied, his spirits lifting again. For example, organic movies, organic novels, etc. Organic movies? Organic novels. Yeah. Organic movies are movies acted by real people. Organic novels are the same concept. He spread his hands to explain, like he was giving a lecture. The opposite would be AI-generated products. AI products are super cheap, meant for mass consumption. Organic movies and novels are a bit more expensive. Plus, there are organic celebrities too. He shifted to another topic, getting more annoyed as he spoke. AI creates very attractive virtual characters to draw in fans and drive consumption. Entertainment companies nowadays tend to focus more on developing virtual characters. Because they can't have their image ruined, they don't have scandals, they absolutely obey company orders, they won't run off with resources, and they stay young forever. They're practically immortal. There are so many advantages. He tapped on his tablet for a moment. Then he projected a panoramic image of a city. 2 entertainment companies once partnered with the mayor of this city to launch a network-wide PK competition. The winning company's flagship virtual character would appear in every corner of the city for a whole month. Street signs, screens on the outside of skyscrapers, the ground, subway entrances, holographic projections in the sky, everywhere. In the industry, they call it a city co-branding. The PK lasted a full month. I heard the total prize pool was unimaginably huge. He sneered, his voice bitter. The fans on both sides fought to the death. But from what I know, the boss of those two companies is actually the same person. He made a killing. The more he spoke, the more aggrieved he felt. My dad works his ass off putting together exploration teams, traveling across the universe to find ruins and destroyed civilizations, bringing them back to sell to the Nanmei civilization just to earn some hard-earned money. Meanwhile, those guys just use a few virtual characters, and they make countless amounts of money. This society isn't fair at all. He muttered, unconvinced. I still have to guard this mineral planet and dig for ore, while they just sit in air-conditioned rooms and make money that I couldn't earn even if I mined this entire planet dry. He tapped his finger lightly against the tablet case. The government should raise the tax on this industry to 90%. He thought about it some more and felt it made even more sense. At least 99%. That would be fair. A long time later, Chun Meng sat alone in the Hongxing, gently rubbing his temples, remaining silent. He had chatted with the chubby guy for a long time, exchanging quite a bit of information. It wasn't until the guy had an urgent matter and hurriedly said goodbye that the conversation finally ended. Chun Meng looked at the darkened screen, a lingering sense of unease still in his heart. His understanding of a level 5 civilization was clearer now. But at the same time, he also saw that path was colder and longer than he had imagined. The only regret was that the chubby guy didn't have a very high status in that civilization. Even though he was a rich second-generation kid with some channels for information, he clearly couldn't dig deeper into the civilization's core secrets. Chun Meng had tried asking him if he knew about something called a cosmic landmine. The guy said he didn't know. Chun Meng then thought that different civilizations might have different names for it, so he briefly explained the function and general appearance of a cosmic landmine. The chubby guy thought for a moment and said he felt that the thing called the Heavenly Palace was very likely a cosmic landmine. When it came to highly specialized knowledge, the guy was completely clueless. But when it came to common knowledge about daily life, he was an open book. That was enough for Chun Meng to get a clear picture of the living atmosphere inside a level 5 civilization. The overall level of science and technology had indeed increased, but the happiness index of the citizens hadn't risen accordingly. There was no more starvation, and no one had to sleep on the streets anymore. The government provided free housing, free vehicles, free basic medical care, and free elderly care. But even so, the sense of social happiness wasn't high. Chun Meng looked at the problem from a very straightforward angle. Happiness comes from comparison. When you witness a massive number of people starving to death, a massive number of people dedicating their entire lives just to buy a house, and a massive number of people too afraid to treat minor illnesses and unable to afford treatment for major ones, only then does enjoying those aforementioned benefits feel like happiness. Unfortunately, the citizens of the Nanmei civilization only saw the nobility, high above, spending so lavishly that they couldn't exhaust their wealth in a lifetime. The salary they worked hard to earn over 1,000 years couldn't even compare to a single bottle of wine the other party casually opened at the dinner table. The wealth gap was so massive that, even with good social welfare, the happiness index remained low. A very pragmatic solution automatically popped into Chun Meng's head. The way to solve this was actually simple. Don't let the people at the bottom see the disparity. The leaders of the Nanmei civilization just needed to make the upper class spend their money more discreetly. Don't be so flashy, just spend it quietly. But clearly, this was either hard to stop, or the people at the top simply didn't care. If Chun Meng were in that position, he would choose an even more ruthless path regarding public opinion. Heavily promote internal propaganda, showing scenes of low-level civilizations constantly suffering from mass starvation due to food shortages. That would increase the commoner's sense of being fortunate. Even fake news would do. To him, news was just a tool. It didn't necessarily have to pursue absolute truth. As long as it hit the target, that was enough. A lie told with good intentions could also be a form of truth. Time slowly passed. In the blink of an eye, a month had gone by. In the flow of the universe, a month was nothing, but on the Hongxing, it was a different story. In just 1 month, almost all the mineral planets had been completely mined out. Massive amounts of resources were continuously stuffed into a dedicated spatial gate for storage. Watching the numbers skyrocket every day was a clear, tangible feeling. This was also the final glory of the Casa Civilization Federation's legacy. Chen Meng sat in the ship, looking at the resource panel and sighing. In his eyes, there was a hint of melancholy. The resources were indeed abundant, but the resources of the Naya star system were basically capped at this amount. Even if he defeated the racial civilization, their territory wouldn't have much left either. He was limited here. Limited by the land and the mines. The next step forced him to go elsewhere. He thought again of a rather bitter stroke of luck. The Starfire civilization was wandering around, tossing out a refrigerator every time they reached a new place. If it weren't for those refrigerators, wouldn't he have been stuck here? The question was, when would he truly find an area with a high enough resource density to break through? 2,997 trillion units of iron ore, 389 trillion units of wood, 1,360 trillion units of copper ore, 349 billion units of crimson heart rock, 479.7 billion units of titanium crystal ore. This was the total amount of resources extracted from nearly all the mineral planets the Hongxing had swept clean. Chen Meng knew very well that this was probably the peak of the Hongxing's resources for at least the next few years. It was time to start mass enhancements. But before enhancing, he glanced again at the conditions for upgrading to a level 3 civilization. Upgrade conditions. Intelligent life forms reach 1 billion. Maximum attack energy range exceeds 20,000. Possess at least 2 planets. Civilization resource reserves exceed 1 quadrillion. Construct more than 10 permanent two-way wormholes. His current total resource reserves had far exceeded 1 quadrillion. A very procedural decision immediately locked into his mind. Just upgrade the civilization first. Otherwise, who knew how long he'd have to wait to stockpile this many resources again next time? The very next moment, the Hongxing found a stable region of space and constructed 10 permanent wormholes. The total cost was less than 1 billion units of iron ore. The reason it was so cheap was simple. The teleportation distance of these wormholes was only a few kilometers, not even a fraction of a light year. Of course, it was dirt cheap. They were practically decorative wormholes, with no significant practical use. But if the goal was just to upgrade the civilization, there was no need to build long-distance wormholes. Building them too far would burn a terrifying amount of resources, and the Hongxing couldn't bear that kind of consumption right now. At this point, the final 2 conditions for the upgrade had been completely satisfied. The previous conditions had already been met long ago. When all conditions were met, the system didn't require manual confirmation. A wave of civilization broadcast light immediately centered on the Hongxing and shot straight into the depths of the universe. Level 2 civilization. Human civilization has successfully upgraded to a level 3 civilization. This was the broadcast signal every civilization emitted after upgrading. The transmission speed was the speed of light. In the vast universe, there was basically no need to worry about this signal immediately drawing in enemies. When warlike civilizations actually receive the signal, your civilization has likely been mostly wiped out or is on the verge of collapse. For almost 99% of civilizations, their lifespan doesn't even exceed the time their own transmission signals drift through the universe. This is very obvious from the level 200 unique supermodel effect of the car speaker. The number of civilization signals drifting in the Naya galaxy is far greater than the number of currently surviving civilizations. The fate of 99% of civilizations is destruction, and this cannot be changed by subjective will. Not long after, on the train's control screen, a new panel slowly appeared. This was the civilization panel after upgrading to level 3. Civilization name, human civilization. Civilization level, level 3. Civilization leader, Chen Meng. Civilization planets, Aquamarine Star, Xuanwu Star, Mineral Star 1, Mineral Star 2, Mineral Star 3, Mineral Star 4, etc. Civilization population, 5.7 billion. Upgrade conditions, intelligent life population reaches 1 billion. Maximum attack energy range exceeds 50,000. Possess at least 10 planets. P.S. Starting from the upgrade to a level 2 civilization and every subsequent upgrade, an upgrade ripple will be emitted, which can be detected by all surrounding civilizations. The higher the level, the wider the range of the upgrade ripple. Civilization perks can receive a random cosmic civilization rune. The range of the upgrade ripple from level 1 to level 2 is 100,000 light-years. And the range of the upgrade ripple from level 2 to level 3 is 1 million light-years. In theory, civilizations 1 million light-years away can all receive the upgrade ripple of human civilization. Of course, that's a matter for 1 million years later. But right now, Qin wasn't in the mood to think that far ahead. He stared intently at the civilization panel, where a long list of options suddenly appeared, scrolling rapidly with a pointer at the top. Whichever option the pointer landed on, human civilization would receive the corresponding random rune. Qin froze, a mix of surprise and annoyance rising in his chest. No one had ever told him about this. No one had mentioned that upgrading to a level 3 civilization would grant a random cosmic civilization rune. And this rune wasn't just for an individual, but for the entire civilization. In the universe, many civilizations had their own unique runes. For example, the Goblin civilization or the Zerg civilization. Only human civilization had nothing, as if forgotten by the universe. Yet, just by reaching level 3, he finally got one. The options were endless. Even though they scrolled at a dizzying speed, Qin still managed to catch a few that looked pretty good. Low probability of generating manhwa stone or within the civilization, gold. Based on the happiness level of the citizens, resource consumption for upgrading components will be reduced by a certain amount, like gold. When the civilization is at war, the consumption of all firepower components will be reduced, blue. When the civilization is under attack, the consumption of all firepower components is halved. These were all functional runes. Similar to components, they also had grades: white, light gold, blue, purple, gold, 7 color. White was the lowest, 7 color the highest. But the grade only represented rarity, not necessarily strength. Whether it was strong or not depended on how the civilization used it. For example, the low probability of generating manhwa stone or was practically useless to Qin. Forget gold, it wasn't even worth white, unless it was given to him for free. On the other hand, having firepower consumption when under attack might not suit a warlike civilization. But for a civilization that loved to turtle up and defend, like the Starfire civilization, it was worthy of being 7 color. The moment they were attacked, their combat power would practically double. Besides functional types, there were also economic types. For example, within the civilization's territory, the generation speed of mineral planets is significantly increased, gold. Within the civilization's territory, the mineral content in generated mineral planets will be higher, gold. Now Qin understood why civilizations pursued vast territories. The larger the territory, the wider the rune's coverage, and the faster the civilization would develop. And there were rule types. For example, within the civilization's territory, a scent that void behemoths dislike will permeate, keeping them away, blue. Can obtain the planetary wormhole tech tree, blue. Can obtain the high-dimensional planet tech tree, 7 color. The civilization's level will permanently stagnate at level 3, but the resources consumed and used to upgrade all components will be reduced to just 1%, 7 color. Qin watched the 7 color option flash across the screen, his breathing growing heavier. He unconsciously clasped his hands together. Only one thought echoed in his mind: roll it again. Stop right there. As the pointer began to slow down, his heart tightened with it. He wanted that exact one. He only wanted that one. To him, the civilization level was indeed important, but it wasn't something he absolutely had to have at all costs. He knew very well that every time a civilization upgraded, it would receive special perks. The higher the level, the more rule-oriented the rewards became. But he didn't care. As long as he had the upgrade effect and resource consumption reduced to 1%, that was enough. With just 1%, he could push his trained components up thousands of levels in the blink of an eye. By then, he would literally become a cosmic god. That civilization rune, to most other civilizations, was absolute garbage. Unless they were on the brink of extinction, no one would want it to fall into their hands. After all, upgrading still required manhwa stones. Even if resource consumption dropped to 1%, where would they get infinite manhwa stones to burn? But he was different. He didn't need manhwa stones. To him, this was the perfect civilization rune. He was even willing to trade all the resources on the train just to get that exact effect. As long as he got it, he would skyrocket. But then, as the pointer slowly came to a complete stop, Chen Mang let out a long breath. A faint glimmer of disappointment flashed in his eyes. It didn't stop on the civilization rune he wanted. What a pity. If he had hit it, he might have even dared to use the power of a level 3 civilization to face a god-tier civilization head-on. The screen displayed the civilization rune he randomly received this time. Every time a civilization wonder recognized by cosmic rules is built, a box containing a random mystery reward will be granted. Maximum limit, 9 boxes. 7 color. His luck didn't seem too bad. At least it was an outstanding cosmic rune. It was just that. Right now, he couldn't see how it would be of any concrete help. Below it was a small line of text. Confirm reroll. Remaining rerolls, 3. Each reroll consumes 1,000 units of iron ore. Chen Mang fell silent. He seriously considered it, the kind of consideration where his brain was calculating profits and losses until his throat went dry. Then he finally spoke up, Xiao AI, help me evaluate this. If I re-roll 3 times, what are the odds of randomly hitting the exact rune I wanted? Xiao AI's voice echoed quickly through the train. Point 1. I don't know if the list of civilization rune options just displayed is the complete set or not. It's highly likely that it isn't. But if we take all the options just shown as the denominator for estimation, the probability is approximately 3 in 1,000. There is no lower bound. The actual estimated probability could be 3 in 10,000, or even lower. Chen Mang remained silent for a long time. He watched the countdown timer slowly appearing on the screen, and finally, he pressed confirm. He accepted this 7-color civilization rune, thinking it over and over. He didn't want to gamble with his luck. He knew very well that if he hit it, the effects would take off immediately. But the odds were too low. It wasn't worth it. The current 7-color was already very good. Next, he didn't even bother studying the civilization rune, nor did he upgrade his components. He walked over to the refrigerator nearby and entered the Starfire civilization. The leader of the Starfire civilization sat in front of the wooden cabin in the field, shaking his head in a daze as if looking into the past. Civilization runes. Such a nostalgic concept. Back then, just for a single civilization rune, the sight of countless civilizations plunging into life and death battles. I still remember it vividly. A lot of people died, but at that time, every day felt like being pushed forward by an inexhaustible drive. He continued slowly, his voice steady as if telling a story to himself. During the process of civilization upgrading, only when reaching a level 3 civilization do you receive a random civilization rune. And it's the only time. Future upgrades will no longer grant them randomly. At least from what I know, upgrading to a level 4 civilization doesn't give one. It's highly likely that upgrading to level 5 doesn't either. He emphasized every word, as if stamping a universal law. A level 3 civilization is considered a threshold. Once you reach level 3, you've officially stepped onto the stage of civilization warfare. You can start showing off, you can take the stage. It's just that. No one can say for sure how long you'll get to sing. Then he changed his tone, lighter but more suggestive. However, even if you can't get civilization runes through upgrades later on, there are still quite a few opportunities in the universe to obtain them. They appear in many ways. For example, you're traveling through the universe and suddenly spot a strange orb of light ahead. When you get close, the train screen displays a message. If you stay at this location for more than 30 days, your civilization can receive a random civilization rune. But after you stay for more than an hour, the coordinates of this orb of light will be broadcast to all nearby civilizations. Anyone who meets the conditions can claim this civilization rune. He chuckled softly. So a massive brawl breaks out. It was fun. The universe was very lively back then. It's just a pity that many opportunities lie in the grand battlefield. Most of the time, I only heard stories about it, but never went myself. Chen Mang caught those last 2 words, his mind instantly on high alert. He asked immediately, trying to keep his voice calm while his thoughts raced ahead. The grand battlefield? The leader nodded. Yeah, when a civilization reaches level 4, they can enter the grand battlefield. It's a special high-dimensional space. No matter where you are in the universe, you can enter it. As long as it's a civilization above level 4, they can enter. And once inside, you're almost guaranteed to encounter civilizations of the same level. He paused for half a beat, as if letting Chun Mang digest the words. Inside, there are countless civilization opportunities. There are 3 ways to enter in total. The first way, gambling with luck. Entering in normal mode. You won't truly die in the grand battlefield. After dying in battle, the participant will automatically exit the grand battlefield space, but the amount of opportunities and resources obtained will only be 1/10 of the normal state. The second way, gambling with your life. Entering in normal mode, but dying in the grand battlefield means true death. The amount of opportunities and resources obtained is at the normal state. The third way, gambling with the civilization's fate. Only the civilization leader can choose this method. Once you die in the grand battlefield, the civilization will be forcibly erased by cosmic rules through unimaginable means. A civilization erased this way will leave absolutely no trace in the universe. Entering through this method, the opportunities and resources obtained are 10 times the normal state. In the grand battlefield, there's a chance to obtain civilization runes. Very interesting. Chun Mang returned to the train's control room and sat down in his chair. His eyes narrowed slightly. This was the first time he had heard of the concept of the grand battlefield. Hearing about it, it was indeed quite tempting. But the thing was, he had never heard that chubby guy mention the grand battlefield. He told himself, next time we meet, I definitely have to ask him if he knows anything about it. Another train of thought immediately surfaced, colder and more realistic. Up until now, there hadn't been any clear information stating that the Naya civilization was destroyed by some powerful civilization. Everything he knew about the Naya civilization was from the stories before its destruction, before that backpacker set off. But thinking about it now, it was highly possible that the Naya civilization wasn't destroyed by someone else. It could be that their civilization leader entered the grand battlefield, chose to gamble with the civilization's fate, and then? That possibility wasn't low at all. Of course, it was all just speculation. As for what really happened, he could only guess. Anyway, these were things that would happen after upgrading to a level 4 civilization. Resources in the universe were abundant, but for a civilization, resources were always in a state of extreme scarcity. At this point, civilizations could only use every trick in the book to seize resources. Chun Mang even suspected that even god-tier civilizations would experience resource shortages at times. After that, he finally looked over at the control screen. After the civilization upgraded to level 3, he could demarcate his civilization's territory. There were almost no requirements. He could claim as much as he wanted, as large as he pleased. As long as 3 conditions were met. 1. The territory must fall within the maximum detection range of the civilization's strongest radar. 2. If he wanted to exceed the radar's range, it was simple. He just needed to drive the train in a loop outside the detection range. Mark a few points, then connect them into a boundary. That would be the territory. As far as the train could run, the boundary could be drawn that far. 3. When demarcating the territory, there must be no civilization with a level greater than or equal to his own within that area. Extremely simple. So simple that it was almost as if the system was bluntly saying, as long as you want it, claim it freely. As long as you can hold on to it. Even if the train was fast enough and went far enough, he could claim the entire universe as his territory without any issue, in theory. Of course, reality was different. And more importantly, the territorial boundaries could be changed at any time. It wasn't a strictly rigid state. In the past, the territory of the Kasha civilization was drawn exactly around the Kasha Federation region. As for him, Chun Mang clicked his tongue. He raised his hand and drew a circle on the screen, marking it out very quickly. The entire Naya galaxy instantly became his civilization's territory. The Zerg civilization was now essentially sitting right inside human civilization's turf. A thought suddenly flashed in his mind, a mix of regret and an itch he couldn't scratch. If I had a functional type civilization rune, like one where the territory naturally generates a small amount of Mafe stones, then it should have started taking effect by now. But he didn't have that kind of rune. So, even though he claimed such a massive territory, it was basically meaningless. It was no different from a child scribbling. He could draw it however he liked. The only benefit was that on the galaxy map, this area would be displayed as the territory of human civilization, which looked pretty satisfying. If other civilizations passed by, they would also see a civilization possessing an enormous territory. Other than that, it had no other use. It felt a bit like playing house. Chen Mang stared at the territorial boundaries of human civilization on the screen, his expression a bit strange. He muttered as if asking himself, so the territories of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of light years held by high-level civilizations, are they just drawn at random too? I don't believe their radars can cover hundreds of millions of light years. In the past, he had heard people say that the territories of high-level civilizations were usually tens of millions or hundreds of millions of light years across. Just hearing it sounded incredibly advanced, like something impossible to rival. But when he personally demarcated his own territory, that sense of mystery suddenly vanished. Wasn't it basically just drawing lines at will? You could draw it however you wanted. It was just that, for now, he couldn't afford to build such expensive wormholes. Otherwise, on paper, he could also have a territory of hundreds of millions. Tens of millions, millions, hundreds of thousands of light years. Thinking up to this point, he cut himself off, as if slapping himself awake. No, that's not right. I really can't do that. There are definitely stronger civilizations around. He didn't have the strength to hold on to something like that. He looked back at the civilization upgrade conditions. One of the conditions to upgrade to a level 4 civilization was that the maximum attack energy range had to exceed 50,000, meaning he needed a level 507 color firepower component. Just as he had guessed, level 200 components were basically the ceiling for a level 3 civilization. And at level 500, one could officially step into a level 4 civilization. Looking at it this way, the speed at which human civilization would advance to level 4 would be much faster. In the universe, there was a phenomenon called the civilization Big Bang. It meant that a certain trained civilization suddenly acquired a massive amount of resources, causing the civilization to skyrocket in level. But Chen Mang had a feeling that from now on, whenever the civilization Big Bang was mentioned, it would be very hard not to mention human civilization. He could explode even faster under one condition. He didn't need Mafe stones. He tried to estimate, within 3 months, wiping out the Zerg civilization and then upgrading to a level 4 civilization would be almost no problem at all. Actually, even considering his current speed, it was already way too fast. In just a few years, he had leaped from an unknown civilization to a level 3 civilization. This speed was much faster than the Kasha civilization and the mechanical civilization. As for the Zerg civilization, that bastard was still just a level 2 civilization right now. If it weren't for their combat power far exceeding the standard of a normal level 2 civilization, they really wouldn't even be worth mentioning. Next, Chen Mang finally glanced at the effect of the civilization rune he had just received. Every time a civilization wonder recognized by cosmic rules is built, a box containing a random mystery reward will be granted. Maximum limit, 9 boxes. 7 color. There was only that one line of text, nothing else. Civilization wonder? Chen Mang frowned slightly, the question automatically spinning in his head. What does it mean to be recognized by cosmic rules? His first reaction was the Great Wall from his previous world. But thinking carefully, that probably wouldn't work. The thing that made the Great Wall so astonishing was that it was built using a massive amount of manpower and effort during an era of extremely backward labor productivity. It was a majestic landscape, elevated by its special context and the weight of history. But for the current human civilization, what was so hard about building a Great Wall millions of miles long? Without the weight of history, it naturally lacked the essence of a civilization wonder. Chen Mang asked directly, Xiao AI, in your opinion, what kind of civilization wonder would be recognized by cosmic rules? Xiao AI replied immediately within the train, I don't know either. There are no clear rules, but how about we just let Daba and his guys try making one? The goblins have put quite a few talent points into the construction category. Chen Mang nodded. Makes sense. Then leave it to them. He decided to let Daba and the others figure it out gradually. Tomorrow, he would ask his good friend, that chubby guy, for more info. He had been talking to him quite a bit these past few days. Between the two of them, there was actually a bit of camaraderie now. At first, he only saw him as a tool to gather information. But the longer they talked, the more he realized that this chubby guy treated others with a sincerity that was almost uncomfortable. He used to dislike this kind of person because it made someone like him, who approached others with an ulterior motive, feel guilty. He preferred associating with scumbags. That way, his conscience could breathe much easier. But gradually, he started to like that sincerity, even though the chubby guy's brain was truly a bit out of sync. Sometimes his conversations were so bizarre they were hard to understand. Inside the planetary train, Daba was in the city. After receiving the order from Boss AI, his face was full of confusion. He tilted his head to look at Fuliu beside him. You have broad knowledge. Tell me, what exactly is a civilization wonder recognized by cosmic rules? He completely didn't understand this order. When he asked Boss AI, wanting a clearer explanation, Boss AI only replied with one sentence. Lord Mang said to improvise freely. Fuliu was silent for a long time. Then he lowered his voice, as if trying to pull a thread out of the fog. I think, since it's a civilization wonder, then it absolutely must be unique, right? Daba immediately nodded vigorously, his expression serious. Right. If it's called a wonder, it definitely has to be unique. Fuliu frowned. But the universe is so big. How can we guarantee that what we create is unique? Daba replied almost instinctively. Then it has to be weird. Weird? Yeah. Fuliu suddenly got excited, as if he had just grasped the crux of the matter. The weirder, the better. Only then can we guarantee that the civilization landscape we create is one of a kind. In the universe, what's the rarest thing? It's definitely something that there's only one of. Daba nodded, his eyes lighting up. Makes sense. Let me think about it. He thought very seriously. He took this order so seriously, it was as if he was grasping a chance to change his life. Last time, Lord Mang had inspected the palace they built. Not long after, he had assigned them such an important task. This proved that Lord Mang valued their construction talent. He had to seize this opportunity. He had to build the best civilization wonder. At the same time, in the southern border region of the Nanmei civilization, on an unnamed mineral planet, the chubby guy had finished packing up everything. He looked at the empty mining site, his eyes full of reluctance, darting around as if wanting to memorize it one last time. He was about to leave this mineral planet. The mine had been completely stripped clean. Yesterday, he had been chatting so enthusiastically that he forgot to tell his mysterious friend that he would be leaving today. He wanted to say goodbye before leaving. After this, there probably wouldn't be a chance to meet again. Right at that moment, a familiar figure appeared once more on the desolate mining site. The chubby guy hurried over, grinning from ear to ear like always. Chen Mang, you're finally here. I have to leave this mineral planet today. After this, it'll probably be hard for us to meet again. Over the past few days, he had learned the other party's name. He even knew that the other party was a civilization leader. The familiar figure in front of him, as usual, handed over a piece of paper. If you continue to contract mining sites, we'll probably still meet. Do you know about the Grand Battlefield? Of course I do. That place is very dangerous, but there are still quite a few people who go in to gamble. If you happen to make it out alive, the harvest is huge. Some people even get rewarded by the government and become meritorious heroes of the civilization. Oh, right. You suddenly asking about this reminds me of something. My dad back then. This time, Chen Mang talked with the chubby guy for a very long time. Until the miner woke up, the dream ended, and the connection was cut off. The chubby guy didn't know that. The reason he could meet the miner was only because the telescope in his hand had a close connection with a cyborg miner on Chen Mang's train. Based on that connection, they were able to meet continuously. This was an extremely special method, very hard to replicate. Moreover, it absolutely had to be in a mining site. For some unknown reason, Chen Mang had tried having Xiao AI create other dreams to meet the chubby guy again, but they all failed. Only the mining site worked. As long as the chubby guy continued to contract mining sites, they would always have a chance to meet again. These past few days, Chen Mang often sought out the chubby guy and the leader of the Starfire civilization to chat. He gained a lot of information, and his horizons broadened significantly. Having a few friends like that in the universe wasn't easy at all. It was a luxury. Inside the Nanmei civilization, there was also a grand battlefield. All level 4 civilizations could enter it to take a gamble. Through the chubby guy's words, Chunmeng finally learned that the place the Starfire civilization leader mentioned, where you only meet civilizations of the same level, was actually just the outer periphery of the grand battlefield. But deep in the inner zone, there were civilizations of all levels. It was a massive free-for-all. All trains, after entering the grand battlefield, would spawn completely at random. This also meant that fleets couldn't drag entire legions in to crush others with human wave tactics. Here, the collective combat of a civilization lost its advantage. This place emphasized the power of a single train. But that was exactly Chunmeng's advantage. Human civilization was too special. It had already upgraded to a level 3 civilization, yet it still had no legion combat power. The civilization's only combat power was practically just his planetary train. He poured all his resources into building up his own train. One was enough. One strongest train, enough to crush tens of millions of useless mobs. He told himself, once I reach a level 4 civilization, I'll go into the grand battlefield and take a look. As for civilization landscapes, the chubby guy knew about them too. He said that inside the Nanmei civilization, there were 3 civilization landscapes. After being built, once recognized by the universe and becoming an acknowledged cosmic landscape, that landscape would receive a special effect. For example, one civilization landscape in the Nanmei civilization was the train graveyard. This was purely a coincidence. Back then, after a great war, the Nanmei civilization dumped a massive amount of garbage and ruins into a sector of the universe. They intended to destroy it all at once, but for some unknown reason, it was unexpectedly recognized by cosmic rules and turned into a civilization landscape. The effect was, in this area, there was an extremely low probability of brewing a soul train. After embedding a soul train into a train, the train's AI assistant could gain an additional supermodel effect. And ever since then, in this area, abandoned trains began to self-assemble, forming many scrap trains that roamed the train graveyard every day. They didn't attack people. Instead, they became a scenic spot that attracted countless tourists to come and admire. Knowing this, Chunmeng only felt a cold emptiness drop in his chest. The Nanmei civilization was a level 5 civilization, yet they only had 3 civilization landscapes. He'd be lucky to make just one. As for 9, there was absolutely no way. Although this civilization rune was 7 color, an extremely high grade, looking at it now, the difficulty of turning it into practical benefits was unusually high. Whatever, forget it. Just let Daba and his guys tinker with it. Whatever they make, they make. I'll just pretend this task doesn't exist. If they pull it off, it's a surprise. If they don't, I lose nothing. However, over the past few days, Chunmeng gradually realized that the power of a high-level civilization was multidimensional. It was self-enhancement from all aspects. It wasn't just about having strong enough attack methods to become a high-level civilization. Things like inner depth required a long time to accumulate. And human civilization, in this aspect, was as blank as a sheet of paper. It had almost nothing. I'll figure that out later. For now, Chunmeng shifted his gaze to the resource panel on the control console. His thought process was very simple. Just spend all this first. It was time to upgrade the train components too. 2,997 trillion units of iron ore, 389 trillion units of wood, 1,360 trillion units of copper, 34.9 billion units of crimson core rock, 47.97 billion units of titanium crystal ore, nearly 3,000 trillion units of iron ore. This was the largest resource reserve the planetary train had ever had. No more talking. Time to start upgrading. First, the most important thing was, of course, the carriage steel armor. When facing the unimaginable methods of some high-level civilizations, armor level no longer held absolute meaning. For example, being directly erased like the Naya civilization. Under that kind of rule-based power, no matter how high the armor was, it was useless. But he still had to upgrade it. Because at the very least, before touching upon rules, armor was still the most obvious lifesaver. He wouldn't allow himself to die from a mundane attack just because he skimped on a layer of defense. That would be a low-level attack, a complete crushing defeat. But in the current situation, with the war against the Zerg civilization about to start, the armor level was still extremely meaningful. Moreover, even for high-level civilizations, those rule-based erasure methods definitely weren't their basic attacks. They couldn't possibly throw out their ultimate move the moment they met. Qin Mang stared intently at the control screen, mentally reminding himself to stay sharp. From beginning to end, this component had always been the biggest resource hog on the entire train. Just upgrading it to level 200 had cost him a whopping 30 trillion units of iron ore. To him in the past, that was a number that made him suffocate just hearing it. The wholehearted support of the Xuanwu civilization had provided less than 10 trillion resources in total. But now, that number was like a grain of sand in the desert. He thought to himself, I can finally stand tall. For a normal 7-color component, upgrading from level 200 to level 500 required 100 trillion units of iron ore. The carriage steel armor alone cost even more, requiring up to 1,000 trillion, far exceeding the consumption of other components. But for the current planetary train, it was still completely acceptable. The next moment, as 1,000 trillion iron ores turned to dust in the carriage and seeped into the train's hull, the component's level shot straight up to level 500, and a new supermodel effect appeared simultaneously. Level 500 supermodel effect of the carriage steel armor, eternal indestructibility. Upon taking energy attacks, the armor will absorb all energy attacks, no level limit, and use them to temporarily increase the carriage's armor level. Lasts for 24 hours. Qin Mang looked at that line of text, a flash of shock in his eyes. He knew very well that level 200 supermodel effects were basically the ceiling for a level 3 civilization. And level 500 supermodel effects were something only a level 4 civilization was qualified to touch. And at level 500, almost every single one was insanely overpowered. But this one, wasn't it a bit too overpowered? In interstellar warfare, the vast majority of attacks were energy attacks. That meant, even if the enemy used a level 1000 main energy A cannon, he would be completely immune. Not only immune, but he could also absorb the energy to temporarily boost his own armor level. The harder the enemy fired, the higher his armor would inflate. Even if it only lasted 24 hours, that was more than enough for a battle. The sound of Qin Mang gulping echoed in the train's control room. His first reaction was to turn and look at the Doppler radar. Previously, he had seen a beam-type main cannon in the dark universe to the south. Its energy output was equivalent to a level 4987 main energy A cannon. At that time, he was standing at the edge of the dark zone and measured the distance to be 80,000 light-years. Now, the distance was even further. He was currently in the Kasha Civilization Federation. That beam attack was over 100,000 light-years away from him, so it didn't show up on the radar. He remembered very clearly, when he first saw that light cannon, he wasn't too panicked. After all, it was 80,000 light-years away. It would take a long time. It would take 80,000 years for it to reach him. He just returned the favor with a few main energy A cannons and didn't think much more about it. But now, that thought suddenly popped out, so clear that it sent a chill down his spine. If I create a wormhole crossing 80,000 light-years and actively seek out that main cannon, wouldn't that level 4987 cannon help me push my carriage steel armor to an extreme height for 24 hours? At least thousands of levels, definitely no problem. It was just that. Qin Mang sighed. Using this to crush the Zerg civilization was truly like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. His current armor was more than enough to suppress the Zerg. This thing should be kept as a foundational trump card, something hidden up his sleeve, not something to be shown off early. If he used it against a level 4 civilization, then at least it would be worthy of a proper fight. He admitted to himself, this was the first true foundational trump card of human civilization in the real sense, something that could definitely be put to use. Before this, his only trump card was the information about the Naya civilization, and that was still speculative. It wasn't certain if it could be used or not. But this one was guaranteed to be effective. I'll hold on to it for now. It's not going anywhere anyway. He also wasn't worried about someone stealing that main cannon. Whoever had the capability to do that, he'd just consider them truly skilled. Thinking of this, he felt something stirring in his chest again, hot and sharp. He started looking forward to meeting a civilization stronger than the Zerg, just to test his strength. When you hold a weapon in your hand, the killing intent naturally rises. When you have a hammer in your hand, sooner or later you'll want to find a nail to hit. Chen Mang took a deep breath, then looked toward the Doppler radar again. The Zerg civilization was still plotting. He didn't know what exactly they were brewing, but he didn't plan on waiting anymore. After finishing this round of enhancements, he had basically hit the ceiling of what this resource area could provide. Waiting any longer was meaningless. He glanced at Xiao Lu's level, feeling a bit of regret. Xiao Lu could only reach level 300, unable to keep up with the carriage steel armor reaching level 500. Clearly, the limit of an S-potential void behemoth was only 300. Breaking through again would be extremely difficult. Relying on the behemoth carriage, it was almost impossible to push it any higher.